Go live button, so let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet. I'm kind of skidding on in here, so I need to make sure that everything is functional before we get rocking and rolling. It looks like we're warm and hot over on Facebook, and Rumble is alive and Twitch is good. Let's double check over here on YouTube before we jump right into this. It's going to ask me for that button, and I'm going to press it, and then we can go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We've got judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today because we've got a lot to get into. We're going to jump into this Afghanistan situation because something is going on over there. We know that Joe Biden is pulling the U.S. out of there, sort of carrying on the Donald Trump efforts to pull us out. And it's looking like there is a little bit of crumbling going on in the country. And so we're going to break that down a little bit because this is one of those issues that has historically been one of these left versus right things, right? If you're a Republican, war, good. And that's something that we do. If you're a Democrat, war is bad, but kind of not really, because when you're in charge, you're going to perpetuate it anyways. And so we're going to take a look at this, maybe from a different lens and go through some of what is happening because the U.S. military is now indicating that they're going to be sending troops back to go in and sort of shore up the withdrawal. So we're going to go through that. We've got some footage from the Mujahideen, which is now right on the verge of sort of capturing most of the country, and go through some analysis about what's happening there. We're going to hear from Jen Psaki and some others, from Lindsey Graham, about what is going on, and then we'll have a discussion about it because there are a lot of complexities surrounding this issue, and I think that some people might expect that it's just very easy to fall in one camp or the other, and I think it's really a lot more complicated than that. And as usual, I think that the government is to blame, right? They cause these things and then they sort of, kick the can down the road for the last 20 years, and we all got to pay for it and deal with it with our tax dollars, but with something more serious, the lives of our loved ones. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Then we're going to change gears and talk about these fake COVID vaccine cards, because apparently this is a giant problem now in many college campuses. And in fact, in Honolulu, they actually arrested 2 individuals flying into Hawaii for passing out these fake vaccination cards. And the FBI came out and they issued a very stern warning, and they said, listen, if you are somebody who is counterfeiting these things, you might be subject to very serious criminal penalties in the form of, prison, 5 years. And the specifics there we're going to get into. We're going to look at a prior case, the first prosecution of a fake vaccine case that happened involving a woman named Julie Mazzi. A little bit of an interesting case there. And then we'll take a look at U.S. Code Section 1017 and really talk about what the FBI says is so problematic about these fake vaccine cards. Then we'll finish up by revisiting a story that we talked about earlier in the week, specifically Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre, of course, was involved in the Epstein, sex scandal for a long time. Apparently, this woman was sexually trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell through Jeffrey Epstein over to Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, over in England. And so, I know that this is sort of, outside of the U.S. jurisdiction, but the U.S. has a pretty interested stake here to make sure that there's justice done in this country. And so the question that I had after the last time we finished our segment talking about Prince Andrew was, how does the country get him back, right? I'm just a small town lawyer here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've never dealt with international subpoenas to go and drag a prince from a foreign nation back into the United States. And so I wanted to kind of poke around and see how that works. And I found that apparently they tried to do it already. They tried to do this back when they were prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein, and it didn't work out so well for them. So maybe we can glean from that it's not going to work out so well this time around. So my point here, folks, we've got a lot to get into. If you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There's a live chat that's taking place right now. We've got Dutch Cheese, who looks like they showed up in the chat. And that might be a first time for Dutch Cheese. Welcome to Dutch Cheese. We've got 3 girlies over there, along with Arnie B5, Want to Know. We've got, I saw Todd Trout over there, and many others. Soul Vikings in the house. Good to see everybody. Over on YouTube, we've got Michael Palmer, Pro Player 2000. We have Zulu Zite, Waiting Tour Tire, Playing Hooky, one, K-Bean as usual, and Danette, Stace in the Case, and many others. So we've got a lot to get into. If you are a supporter at Locals, we first and foremost very much appreciate that. But you can ask a question using this form. It is the watchingthewatchers.locals.com exclusive form where you can ask a question, and we'll do our very best to get to them today on the show. All right, so let's get into the news of the day. Afghanistan, as long as I've been alive, it's kind of been a problem. Ever since I was a high school student, we were always sort of dealing with these foreign wars. And after 9/11, many of us, especially people my age, were sort of, kind of gung-ho. America got hit. 9/11 really put us on our heels, and we wanted to be a part of the winning team. We wanted to go back and fight for justice because we got hurt on that day. And what resulted was a lot of uniformity, a lot of unity, as Joe Biden likes to say in this country. And almost unanimously, the country decided that they wanted to go and invade these foreign nations, right? Iraq, Afghanistan was right before that. And so we've been dealing with this for a long time, something like over 20 years now. And the question has always been, what do we do about this? Do we stay there? Do we get out of there? And it felt like to me a lot of this has just been kind of kicking the can down the road until you start to maybe think that there is some method to the madness here, that maybe the idea is that the U.S. stays there indefinitely, permanently. John McCain said something like this when he was running against Barack Obama. Somebody was asking him back then in 2008, they said, "Hey, John, what are we going to do about Afghanistan or Iraq?" And he said, "Well, why don't we just stay there?" And like, what, like forever? Like 20 years? He said, "What? Make it 50, make it 100. It doesn't matter." Because the idea was from the military-industrial complex to create this base over there that would allow the U.S. to have a foothold in the Middle East for the foreseeable future. And so, that was sort of the neocon belief that the United States was in the business of nation building and spreading democracy around the world so that democracy could catch fire and then spread around and root out some of the things like terrorism and some of these other inhumane atrocities taking place all around the world. And we see it on a regular basis. So we've got a lot of complex issues that we need to deal with. And the question has always been, well, if we are going to pull out of there, how do we do it? And is it enough time? It's been 20 years. Have we given the local population enough time to sort of create their own government, create their own security forces so that when we do leave, that we leave responsibly, so that we don't leave this cratering, smoldering cauldron of death and madness? And so now we're sort of at that moment. Donald Trump, when he was in office, was kind of the first Republican that wasn't this grand war hawk that was always talking about, just bombing whomever and setting up bases in all different parts of the world. One of the first presidents that on the Republican side that I saw that was really sort of shattering that same narrative. And many people came to his side and supported him on that basis. And so now he put this all in motion, and now Joe Biden is kind of picking up the ball and concluding it. Now we're sort of moving out even earlier than expected. And the question that we're having now, well, is, is this good? Is this bad? What does this look like? Should we have disengaged more smartly? And then the question is, well, we had 20-something years to do it. So why is it not prepared for our withdrawal? If you are on that side of the coin. And then we're going to check in with Lindsey Graham and many others who are saying that no, but essentially what Joe Biden is doing here is a mistake. So we've got a lot to get to. Definitely want to hear from you on this segment, so get those keyboards warmed up. All right, the headline here that we're going to jump off on is back from May 25th, okay? So we're going to rewind the clock a little bit and go back a couple months, posted May 25th by Thomas Gibbons, Eric Schmidt, Helen Cooper, over here at the New York Times, says, the Pentagon accelerates withdrawal from Afghanistan, says American troops are set to be out by mid-July, well ahead of President Biden's September 11th deadline. They say in the subtext here, even as big issues remain unresolved. From Kabul, Afghanistan, U.S. troops and their NATO allies intend to be out of Afghanistan by early to mid-July. Well, we're a little bit behind schedule on that. Well ahead of the September 11th withdrawal deadline. Military officials said in what has turned into an accelerated ending to America's longest war, right? And many people from my generation are just tired of it. We've been in this for forever, and we're starting to have even more disdain for the government, like even less trust than we had back then. Back then, they told us, oh, weapons of mass destruction. We're going to go in there. We're going to eliminate Osama. We're going to eliminate Saddam Hussein. We're going to then create this little ecosystem where democracy will flounder and flourish. The local populations will welcome us as liberators, and the world will become a better place as a result of that. I kind of go in, drop, some democracy, and then pull back out. That was how it was framed to us. Well, I was too young and naive back then to really recognize it. But looking back in hindsight, you say, oh, well, yeah, this is just what the government does. As soon as they get their little claws on a little bit of power, they're going to hold on to it for dear life. We're seeing it happen again right now with COVID, with the lockdowns, the mask mandates, the vax mandates. It's all coming around again, right? The same arguments that they made here for the pandemic, it's only 2 weeks to slow the spread. Then we're going to get back to normal. No, it's never was that. Same with the war. Well, we're going to go over there and solve a few things. No, it's been 20-something years, and so we're all sort of tired of it. The question always has been, is this still in America's interest to some degree? At some point, you got to ask yourselves that question, right? It's okay, I guess, if you want to be this bleeding heart person that wants to go solve all the problems of the world, if you have the capacity and the bandwidth to do that, which of course is impossible. So it is an idealist dream that is unfortunately disconnected from reality. So the rest of us are trying to have this conversation. What do we do now? What's in America's best interest? The country is crumbling all over the place. We are seeing infrastructure fail throughout the nation. Why are we losing life, liberty, and treasure over there in the form of human life, our brothers and sisters? Okay, now, but the race to the exits, says the New York Times, since Biden is now withdrawing and they're accelerating the withdrawal, which has picked up steam as plane loads of equipment and troops are flown out of the country, right? This is back in May, leaves the United States grappling with huge unresolved issues that officials had thought they would have more time to figure out. So kind of much the same pattern that we've been seeing from the Biden administration. They go in, they change a bunch of rules, and then everybody else on the back end, all of the other bureaucrats downstream from them, the people who actually have to enforce and implement their policy disasters, they are stuck holding the bag. We saw this with the border and immigration. Joe Biden came out, said, well, no, we're going to reverse that racist orange maniacs xenophobic policies, and now you can come into the United States rather than remain in Mexico. And now we've got Mayorkas just came out and said that over 200,000 in July now came across the border. So again, a policy change from Joe Biden that resulted in a catastrophe, and now everybody is sort of having to clean up the mess. Same thing happened here with foreign policy. Why wouldn't it? Fortunately here, he didn't put Kamala in charge, so Joe Biden can take ownership of this one. But it's the same situation. He is now saying, well, I'm in office now. We're going to accelerate this, figure it out on the back end, generals. It's up to you. New York Times is even saying, yeah, huge unresolved issues as they accelerate the timeline. So if you are a citizen, if you're over in Afghanistan, if you're somebody who's a security component, you're over there helping to rebuild this democratic infrastructure that we've been promised for the last 20 years, you might have had a bad day today. Or you might still be having a bad day today because this security alert came out from the U.S. Embassy. This is official, and this is a scary little alert to get if you're somebody who thought that things were going well when you woke up. Not so good. It says the U.S. Embassy. Now, this is the location throughout Afghanistan. This is a security alert from the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan. Says the embassy urges U.S. citizens to leave immediately using available commercial flight options, okay, which is a problem, as we're going to see, given the fact that the Taliban has basically recaptured large swaths of the country. So emergency, go buy a plane ticket and get the heck out of there, and good luck. Now it says, if you cannot afford to purchase a ticket, they're going to give you some information about a loan, so you can go apply for a loan. If you are a U.S. citizen and delaying your departure while you await an immigrant visa for a spouse, give us a call. Given the security conditions and the reduced staffings, the embassy's ability to assist U.S. citizens in Afghanistan is extremely limited, even within Kabul, right where the embassy is. They send you a link. Go see what we can do and what we can't do in a crisis. U.S. Embassy reminds citizens that on April 27th, the U.S. State Department ordered departure from the U.S. Embassy and government employees whose functions can be performed elsewhere due to increasing violence and threats. Travel advisory gave them a level 4 do not travel due to crime, terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, armed conflict, and COVID-19, of course. Domestic flights and all of those things are severely limited. subject to cancellation or closure. So they recommend in paragraph 1, get on a plane, go find a commercial airliner and get the hell out of here. But down here in paragraph 2, it's like, oh, by the way, domestic flights and ground transportations, outside of Kabul are severely limited. So if you're in, you got to get out of here like right now, because they are circling up and this is going to be problematic. It continues. They says just, enroll in here to receive security updates, and it gives you some very clear-cut actions to take. Consider leaving Afghanistan via the earliest available commercial transportation. Develop a plan of action that does not rely on the U.S. government assistance. We are not here to help. Understand what the State Department can do and cannot do. Enroll in this program to get some new security updates. And if your passport expired, well, you still got to renew your passport before you leave. So it's not much love there. They're like, hey, we told you, April 27th, we told you it was coming. We're going to throw everybody else out. We're going to throw all property owners out of their homes and sort of seize their property for other people. But in this case, no love for you, right? You're on your own, people. Get out of your houses. Get out of there. Find an airliner. If you have financial problems, you can go apply for a loan. If you have any questions about it, I'm going to refer you to this FAQ. What the State Department can and can't do, good luck. All right, so, maybe you're saying to yourself, I guess that's their problem for being in Afghanistan. I guess that's one way to look at it. But sounds like they're just sort of abandoning ship to some degree. And I want to show you what's going on now. So you might, if you're that person, if you're that citizen who's waking up going, oh, wait, honey, we just got this memo from the U.S. Embassy. They said they can't protect us anymore. They sort of said that they could, and now they can't. So we better go. Well, should we book a flight? Well, there aren't any, because the Taliban is surrounding the entire city. So, or working their way closer to that. So let's take a look here. I've got some footage. This was posted over on Twitter. Says that Kandahar in complete conquest. So you can see this was translated. It says the Mujahideen reached the martyrs' square. Praise be to Allah. So I'm going to just show you this. It is, it's not violent. There are some firearms in it, but very briefly, I just wanted you to listen to the sound. You can hear what's going on in this city, which is apparently in Kandahar. So this is what it sounds like. A lot of sounds of war going on. So if you are sensitive to that, of course, be advised. All right, so you can just hear kind of the noises, the sound of, the bombs, the gunshots, whatever's happening there. There's a lot of activity, and we're going to show a map here in a second of sort of the surrounding areas as allegedly the Taliban forces are encroaching near and sort of, coming upon the Kabul embassy. So a couple clips here. Before we do that, some updates now. So you just heard what is happening. So today, the Pentagon said, oh, yeah, that sounds pretty bad. It's going to be a disaster. So they decided today to send the 3,000 troops back to Afghanistan. So pull them out, send them back. Now they're going back to evacuate Americans and won't say whether the U.S. will stay past August 31st. So the deadline is now sort of being reversed, isn't it? The State Department announces the Kabul embassy drawdown as Taliban captures 12 cities. All right, so they're just surging on through. Pentagon is sending troops back into Afghanistan to help evacuate some U.S. personnel. Diplomats are weighing how soon they could have to totally evacuate the U.S. embassy, where some 4,000 people are employed. That's a big operation, right? Get on an airplane. Good luck. State Department last week warned U.S. citizens to get out of the war-ravaged nation immediately, which is good. Taliban now seize control of 12 provincial capitals, 2/3 of the nation. Taliban fighters are going door to door and forcing young women in captured areas into sex slavery. And they're executing Afghan forces who surrender. So it's sort of deja vu, right? Remember when all this was going on in Iraq and we had ISIS and all of that, the beheadings, the rapes, the tortures, the drowning people alive, the burning people alive, all of that stuff, right? So we're probably in for another round of that, which of course is always very, very good. So it kind of, it scares the hell out of everybody back home. Everybody goes, oh, we're about to be taken over by terrorism again. And so then that suddenly justifies, I don't know, another 20 years of war or something because of that. So we're getting ready to go back through that cycle again just like we're in season 2 of pandemic, and it's just the worst season ever. It's going to be probably another round 2 of this again. So we'll see how season 2 is of the Middle Eastern war. It's probably like season 2022 now. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Now, here is U.S. military brass coming out and telling us what this is going to look like, what the 3,000 troops going back looks like. And so they're going to tell us, well, you know, it's really complicated military terms. I never served in the armed services, so it's complicated for somebody like me to understand what he's saying. But he's talking about, you know, a short term. Well, you can listen in and tell me what you think.
As you know, and I'm sure you heard from my colleague over at the State Department, the President has ordered the reduction of civilian personnel at our embassy in Kabul and the acceleration of the evacuation of Afghan special immigrant visa applicants from the country. To enable this safe, orderly reduction, the Secretary of Defense has directed the Department to position temporary enabling capabilities
there it is,
to ensure the safety and security of U.S. and partner civilian personnel. I'm going to break this down for you just real quick.
All right, so the first thing we'll pause on is the temporary enabling capabilities, right? You love these little phrases that these bureaucrats come up with. It's like, are you sending troops back or not? Are you sending multiple battalions to go back in there and take care of business? Yeah, yes or no? You're going to call it these multiple, you know, or what these kind of these temporary, you know, whatever facilities, just like we see on the border, these emergency pop-up sites all over the place. And so it's still 3,000 troops. Now, as he explains what that is supposed to be, you're going to see we have a lot of personnel going back over there. Here he continues.
Will consist of 3 infantry battalions that are currently in the Central Command area of responsibility. They will move to Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul within the next 24 to 48 hours. 2 of those battalions are United States Marines, and 1 is a U.S. Army battalion. The next movement will consist of a joint U.S. Army Air Force support element of around 1,000 personnel.
Wow.
To facilitate the processing of SIV applicants. Initial elements of this movement, of this element, will arrive in Qatar in the coming days. The third movement is to alert and to deploy 1 infantry brigade combat team out of Fort Bragg to Kuwait, where they will be postured and prepared if needed to provide additional security at the airport. We anticipate those forces will reach Kuwait sometime within the next week. Now, I want to stress that these forces are being deployed to support the orderly and safe reduction of civilian personnel at the request of the State Department and to help facilitate an accelerated process of working through SIV applicants. This is a temporary mission.
Oh, there it is.
With a narrow focus.
All right. Well, we'll see. Temporary, narrow focus. We'll see. You saw it's basically 3 different movements with 5 different battalions. Marines are going, Army's going, infantry's going. We've got little bases being set up in case they need support. And so, you know, it's going to be short and narrow. And we'll see. We'll see if they're out by August 31st. We'll
as with all deployments.
We'll see. All right, so that was from the military. Let's see what Jen Psaki had to say. So people are already asking her about this. She's in the White House today, and a gentleman was asking her about this. You know, we got some questions about Afghanistan. Here's how she handled it.
The President promised that the United States would continue to provide civilian and humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. But if the Taliban were to take over the government again, won't those individuals be withdrawn?
Well, first I would say that we have every intention of continuing an ongoing presence in Kabul, which is continuing even after we bring our military who are serving home by the end of August.
Okay.
But we will also continue to be partners to the Afghan government. That's something that the president reiterated when he met with leaders just a week and a half ago. That includes security assistance, that includes humanitarian assistance, and that includes over-the-horizon capacity to ensure that we are working to address any threats that we face. That will continue, and we intend to have a presence on the ground in our embassy there in Kabul.
It does seem like the Taliban is starting to gain more power and take over there.
Yeah.
What's the United States government, what's President Biden willing to do after pulling troops out?
Well, I would first say if you take us back to when the president made this decision and announcement, he asked his team to do a clear-eyed assessment, not to sugarcoat it, of what the impact could be of withdrawing our troops from Afghanistan. After a 20-year war, a war that the president continues to feel does not have a military solution. What the president is continuing to press on is a political solution and political negotiations and discussions, which we hope will reconvene soon, to move toward a political solution on the ground to bring greater peace and stability to the people of Afghanistan.
Okay, so, all right, so, there's a lot there. So first and foremost, I'm very glad that she is telling us that they have every intention of having a continuing president. That's good, because many of us have a lot of questions about that. Not so sure that I agree with her on that. But the rest of the point here was that, an ongoing continuing presence don't know what that means. This could be, the apparatus that was just described by the military. They're sending them back in there, and we've got this sort of, it's not the military now. It's not we already did our withdrawal, but now it's just an ongoing presence, right? So we've seen this all the time out of the government. They just change the labels, and it's this perpetual, I think Janet Napolitano did this. It's not the war on terrorism. It's unexpected human tragedies or something like that. They changed the language, but it's the same thing. So we'll see what goes on there. But, Jen Psaki is sort of doubling down on it. Says Joe Biden, this is what he said. He said that this is not a winnable war militarily, which you might agree with that. You might actually say, yeah, you're right. We've been there for 20 years. This is an insurgency, the likes of which probably is never going to be eradicated. It's sort of, woven into the culture over there. And the idea that the United States is gaining anything by continuing this perpetual presence there is maybe slowly fading in terms of popularity with the American people. But she then pivots, which you might even agree with her on that one. But then she pivots and then says, well, we're just going to have to deal with this politically. We're going to see what we can do politically with the Taliban, which we've all seen what many of these organizations do, right? If the Taliban starts to engage in the same sort of atrocities that we saw ISIS do, is there any belief that they're going to be a reasonable diplomatic political entity there? Probably not. And so it sounds like a little bit of sugarcoating. If the Biden agenda, if their intention is that we're just going to get out of there and whatever happens, happens, right? That's at least a little bit more intellectually honest. You might disagree with that from a moral standpoint. But the idea that they're going to sell this thing to us as it's just a political solution, I think that leaves a little bit to be desired. That being said, there's really no other way to frame it. All right, and so that was Jen Psaki. Let's see what else we have. I think we have a map. Yep, here's the map now of what the actual infrastructure looks like over there. So you'll notice April 2021, this was an article. I think this was an AP article. Yeah, AP took this picture. You can see Kabul is here, and you'll notice that in green, this is government-controlled counties or sectors or whatever. So a lot of green. We have a lot of green here in the middle of the country. And then all of these light sort of tan colors are contested areas. So the government, and the Afghani forces are making stands in these different sectors. And then we have Taliban control, which are here going to be in the orange. And so unknown are going to be in the grays. And you can just see what it looks like, right? It's kind of one of those color tests. Like, can you see the number 6 in there? Kind of hard. A lot of different colors all over the place. The country is in a war. We've got different pockets where there's control and contest taking place all throughout the country. So then we fast forward, just a couple months go by, and now this is what it looks like. So we can see the Taliban here in August, they've overrun many of the provincial capitals. We can see that Kabul was over here, and it is still sort of in that same area, right, being slowly surrounded by Taliban forces. As you can see, the country just slowly falls under their control. And so, okay, right, this is the compare and contrast. Maps show districts where the Taliban are predominantly in control. Data compiled by the Long War Journal, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Washington-based research institute. Data cannot be verified independently in all cases, but in line with reporting from the AP. So, that is happening. And I always thought that Mike Huckabee actually gave a pretty good answer on this stuff back when he was running for president. I forget when that was, maybe back in 2008, but, said something to the effect that the U.S. went in there and sort of broke it, right? If you go in and you break something, you're responsible for fixing something. And that doesn't look so good. Now, you can, again, have a lot of differing opinions on this. Here is a picture from the scene on the ground. Taliban militants are seen inside the city, 150 kilometers away from the national capital of Kabul. And you've got this guy here with, a bazooka, RPG, whatever that is. And so, you take a look at that where you've got armed soldiers you've got a civil war, you've got a lot of death and destruction, and it's easy to jump on the bandwagon with Lindsey Graham. He says all of this is the result of President Biden believing he knows more than his military advisors, apparently learned nothing from Iraq. When it comes to Afghanistan, the worst is yet to come. And so, there are many people who totally agree with that. They look at photos like this and they say this is horrendous. This is an awful situation. We've got children are forced to flee their homes due to fighting in Afghanistan. They drink tea, sit in a refugee camp. Here's another one. Families rest in a camp in Kabul after they fled their homes due to the fear of the Taliban and sought shelter in government areas. Well, actually, those look nicer than some of the refugee immigration migrant camps that our own government is giving to some of the southern border migrants here in the United States. But so you can look at those things and say, right? The United States has a moral obligation to go around the world and help root out atrocities wherever they're happening. And so many people believe that. And many other people take a look at a statement like Lindsey Graham and they say, well, listen, brother, you have been in power for the last, 30 years. And so your side has been in Afghanistan. You have been in Iraq. And a lot of these same problems are still, manifesting themselves. And more specifically, what does that benefit the United States of America for? Why is the United States government funding all of this? Why are the United States people losing their loved ones and spending their dollars to rebuild other countries when we've got crumbling infrastructure all around our own country, where California has fires raging every summer? Different states have a difficult time keeping the stinking electricity on in many parts of this country. Water's bad. Roads are falling apart. We have morons in Congress who pass a $1.2 trillion spending bill, infrastructure bill. Nobody knows where the money's going. Probably not going to fix most of those things. So, we look at that and we start to ask ourselves as Americans, what are we doing? What we were promised there was a short little stint of America's security, American security. And that never happened. We've lost many lives, spent trillions of dollars over there. And it doesn't look like the people are accepting of this new vision for democracy in their lives. And so at what point does the U.S. continue to spend our blood, sweat, and toil, our treasure over there? Lindsey Graham would probably say forever, whatever it takes, right? As long as it takes, as long as the battle continues. And now, so final point here from Jen Psaki. She says, the Taliban also has to make an assessment about what they want their role to be in the international community. So here's Jen Psaki here, a very short clip, and we'll jump right into the chat.
The Taliban also has to make an assessment about what they want their role to be in the international community.
All right, so let's jump into the super chats. Let's jump into the watchingthewatchers.locals chats and see what you have to say about this. It's a complicated topic. I totally understand that. So we're probably going to have some differing opinions, but that's what's just so dang fun about the show. All right, our first one here from I'm Not Gas says, I'm no Biden fan, but I will not criticize him for this. I don't care what the Pentagon-sponsored talking heads say on the news. There was no right way to leave, no matter what it would be, messy. This outcome would have happened if we stayed there 1 more year or 100 more years. I voted for Obama for his promises to bring our troops home. I voted for Trump for his promises to bring our troops home. I'll even give Biden a win for actually keeping this going. We spent trillions propping up a corrupt government full of drug dealers and child molesters so they can fight the Taliban, a theocratic band of extremists who kill girls for going to school. Our military presence can't fix their culture. We were extremely naive and arrogant to think that we could. So that's a good comment there. I'm not gas. I think I agree with a lot of what you said there. And so I like the passion there, right? I think I'm kind of in your boat. We're all kind of tired of it. All right. We got Angie says, a bit off topic, but what are your thoughts on the Julian Assange trial? I haven't been following it too much, but I know that there's a big extradition battle that is taking place. Maybe we'll cover that on the next segment. Okay. So those were Prince Andrew. So just a quick reminder to kind of, if you ask a question ahead of the show, I may not get to it. So you may want to just save those questions and resubmit them when we're on that segment. All right, we have this. Another one. I'm Not Gas says, I do like this issue for exposing partisan hacks. You can see people take 180-degree stances on this issue now that it's Biden in office, either praising him or hating him for it. And you can see now who on the out and out, who the warmongers are, who have said pulling out of Afghanistan is too soon under Trump and now under Biden. Yeah. Right. You can. It can sort of break that, right? Donald Trump was one of the first Republicans who's sort of anti-war, right? Kind of from the very beginning, and was always ripping on Iraq and all of that stuff. And you can debate that, right? He has clips where he's playing both sides of the fence there, but yeah, right, easily. And it is funny, and it is kind of a Trumpy, right? Trump kind of started it, so people who are criticizing him on that, I think, are criticizing him on the mechanism, right? On the way he accelerated it and the whole thing. And so you can have qualms about both, I think. We have Want to Know says, military worried about suicides for those that served there. Well, that's terrible. Yeah, I think that our armed services often get overlooked in that area, mental health for sure. Donald Trump says, I have a big ego, but I'm not as petty as Joe Biden wanting to withdraw on 9/11, which is it was a weird thing. America spent 20 years in Afghanistan, yet as soon as we withdraw, it starts to collapse. Then Afghanistan is going to collapse like Libya with open slavery. Biden wants to send troops back to Afghanistan because he wants the money from the military-industrial complex. Horrible for America. Yeah, kind of, perpetual war. It's very good for business. And if we don't have foreign, affairs, well, they're just going to turn it inland now. They're just, instead of foreign terrorism, international terrorism, what do we have? Domestic terrorism, which is what Nancy Pelosi continues to call it. Oh, Lorenzo Greasy Bottoms says that, I can't read that. Lorenzo wants to get aggressive with some military might. Sergeant Bob says, the bottom line is that people in the Middle East countries know full well they cannot again trust the USA. Yeah, once trust is lost, so is any potential for having influence. I wonder who is running all this. Doubtful that it is Sleepy Joe, although ultimately he owns it. Yeah, right, he is going to own it, and there's a lot to that. There's a lot to the idea that, well, the person who pulls out of it, whatever the consequences are, they're going to have to deal with that. And the follow-up question to that would be, how would Donald Trump have pulled out? Would it have been different? Would the consequences have been the same? I don't know. Maybe. Want to Know says, let's just leave all the Afghanistan refugees too. They're going to be killed and tortured. And it's just going to be bad. Yeah, so just I get your point. Peely Wally says the U.S. and the UK should never have went into Afghanistan or Iraq. Just because we have democracies that work doesn't mean all countries can operate the same way. Some countries need to be and do operate better under other hardline leaders, just like China. We should stay out of the other countries' troubles and mind our own business. It is less costly and safer for our citizens moving forward that way. Yeah, I agree with that. We should mind our own business. And the federal government should mind their own business as well. We have Sergeant Bob says, do we see another Benghazi? Maybe Hillary should be brought back as a consultant. Yeah, because she did such a good job there. Good to see you, Sergeant. Hunter Biden is here, says, did somebody say sex slaves? There's a wild Hunter Biden story going around here. I'm going to look at it and see if we can talk about it on this channel, but it is so bad. I'm not sure. We have Robute says, if Afghanistan starts to collapse as soon as U.S. troops leave, it really indicates that the central government is weak and incompetent. Considering the government is weak and easily loses to Afghanistan with the Taliban using captured tanks and equipment, leading to Afghanistan collapsing, then being there is such a waste of time. Also, 3,000 troops, even enough to stop the collapse or even the evacuation. This is such a train wreck. That's I think the biggest critique here is that the whole thing just feels like, man, it's just it is a train wreck. Pull everybody out, do it quickly. Everybody sounds the alarms, send them back in just to remove the embassy. Like you couldn't even secure the embassy before you left. Ridiculous. All right. Ronald Reagan is here, says there is nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. I know. Missed the old Gipper. All right. Let's jump over to some super chats so I make sure I don't miss any of those. We've got Dr. Sammy D says, those who helped the U.S. government in Afghanistan were greedy war profiteers who aided and abetted the U.S. government. No sympathy from me. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Of course, war is ripe for corruption and bribery and all sorts of nefarious deeds. And we've seen that throughout all of history. Why would we think it's any different now? We have Alex Bogey says, before deploying to Afghanistan 5 years ago, I was briefed that the war was lost, so this was inevitable. I think Trump shrewdly pulled the troops out after the election so that Biden will get blamed. Yeah, right. Hang it on. Maybe some strategery to that, but it is also a sad thing that that's how you were briefed and that's what we're doing. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Eddie Oliver is here, says, Rob, were you aware the Taliban has already started beheading Afghani translators? Everything Biden does is a complete disaster. It's like he doesn't even think it through before he does something because it's about the feelings. and about the policy wins back home, right? The traditional American voter are not as plugged into these issues as you and I are. We spend our time talking about these things because it's important to us. And it should be important to more people. Maybe we would see more competent leadership if more people were engaged in the process. But the government has just said, no, we'll take care of everything for you, so you don't need to think anymore. That way, we can just do whatever the hell we want, and nobody's going to have any oversight over us. So in this situation, Joe Biden just does what he does. Just goes and makes some quick changes, and it's going to be a nice policy win. We're not going to be racist anymore in this country at the border. So we're going to make some policy changes that causes more harm to the migrants than under Trump. Same thing will probably happen here, right? We're going to pull out immediately. Sir, we got some, maybe we should think about evacuating the embassy first. Well, I don't care. I can't remember what I said yesterday anyways. So just get it done. All right. And now they're sending troops back. It really looks incompetent. And it's kind of on pattern with the rest of the activity we see from the administration in general. They also have changed, mask guidance and all of the data from, the CDC kind of ebbs and flows on any particular day. So it's just kind of a dynamic administration. Sometimes we're going to do this. Sometimes we're going to do that. And the whole thing is just going to be a disaster. We have another one from Eddie who said, Rob, I'm a vet who served during Desert Storm. Yeah, this withdrawal could have been better. Exclamation point. It was a top-down decision with no input from their subordinates, which sounds about right? It's the policy at the top, and the S rolls downhill, as we know. Thank you very much for those super chats, and Eddie Oliver, appreciate all of that. Jumping back over to locals, let's see what else we've got. Dewey Sniff'em says, no, I can't read that. I can't read that. So, Genghis Khan says, it's nearly impossible to conquer Afghanistan and occupy it for any significant amount of time. I conquered Afghanistan, but it took a long time, involving razing cities to the ground, wanton slaughter and genocide, as well as scorched earth tactics. So the Afghanistan would not be able to hold unless they engaged the same tactics as I did. Well, there you go, folks. That's Genghis Khan chiming in and giving us some good, ancient military advice about Afghanistan being difficult. Thank you for that, Genghis. Very, very appreciative. Kenny 1B says, not only is Biden losing Afghanistan, but he's letting China ramp up offensive nuclear capabilities, ignoring Russia's continued aggression, including taunting large quantities of tactical nuclear weapons, all while cutting the U.S. budget of the military, decimating the use of the nuclear enterprise. Also cutting oil production and then going and begging OPEC to bring that back up. So it's kind of a disaster. It's just awful. We have another one here from Petty Biden. Petty Biden's here. Says the Afghan warlords, which gave the Taliban the power, were pissed off after America became perfidious and broke their promise. This resulted in Afghan warlords supporting the Taliban, which enabled them to conquer Afghanistan. Note, the Taliban were reasonable when Donald Trump was in office, engaged in diplomatic negotiations. It's just Joe Biden was petty and wrecked the deal. That's from Petty Biden. Yeah, there's some of that going on too. Gail is here. Says, when will we ever learn that the USA cannot fix the Middle East? Maybe we'll learn after this time. Probably not. Greg Marat says the Taliban always wanted to create an Islamic state between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The Taliban in Pakistan is actually much stronger than Afghanistan. They were funded by Saudi to wedge a bloc against Iran from the east. All this can be chalked up to a 1,000-year-old conflict between the Sunnis and the Shias. If you are on the side of the Saudis, this is not necessarily something bad. Would that benefit the U.S. as a Saudi? Is a U.S. ally and Iran is not. That's from Greg Marat. So, yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Middle Eastern international diplomacy and all of that conflict. I think that the real question, at least in my generation, and many people on my side of this equation are saying, what is in it for the United States? I know it's selfish, and I know that that's a horrendous thing to say, but what are we getting out of it? We've been over there for 20-something years, and I understand the idea that a more democratic world is better for the world, but that requires some enrollment from the people who are in that geographical region. If they have no interest in it, then what are we there? And if they can if they came out and said, for oil, Rob, it's for oil. We need oil. We don't have enough oil. We're there for the oil. We need it. Sorry. Okay, well, at least that's a reason. All right. Next up, we've got from Wide Awake says, help me out. I was 5 when 9/11 happened. I can remember it on the news like I was 5. What did the terrorists even want? What is the end game for all of that terrorism? I don't know. I think it is about a perpetual war right? There are just some cultures and societies that just have to go and fight a war, right? That's sort of the purpose of living. The purpose of living is to go and fight for the cause and then die for the cause, right? That's the whole purpose of living. So once you're in that culture and a death in the name of your ideology is cherished and treasured, well, you sort of get this culture where that is rewarded and encouraged and perpetuated. Other than that, I don't know. Do they want their own geographic region? Probably not. I think they just want power and bloodshed. That's just how some people live in the world. We have another one here, says a rigorous nuclear deterrent prevents the need from U.S. troops occupying hostile lands. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. We have another one from Arnie B5, says, President Trump sent a press release concerning the withdrawal. Non-YouTube friendly statement. Let's see here. He says, if I were president, the world would find that our withdrawal from Afghanistan would be a conditions-based withdrawal. I had discussions with top Taliban leaders whereby they understood what they were doing now would not have been acceptable, would not have been much different and much more successful withdrawal. And the Taliban understood that better than anyone. What is going on now is not acceptable. It should have been done much better. Yeah, I think that's okay. I think that's an okay statement. So I read that. Thank you for that. That was from Arnie B5. I think that's okay. YouTube gets a little bit squirrely when he talks about, makes allegations about the last election. That's when they really get upset about it. But yeah, right. That's kind of the point that I think a lot of people are mentioning. It could have been better. We have Lorenzo Greasy Bottom says YouTube friendly versions. Okay. I still can't read that, Lorenzo. Lorenzo is advocating for, let's say, a lot of fury militarily and fireballs in that area. Okay, we have It's Ed says, hey, Rob. Love you, buddy. Unfortunately, you are incorrect about something. It's only in the last 20 years that Republicans became war happy. Prior to that, we didn't want war. Check the history. It was the Dems that wanted war, even under Clinton. Once Bush Jr. wanted to go to war, total rhino, the ideology turned. I'm never for American blood being shed on foreign soil. I hate the idea of war crimes that happens there, but that is a cultural thing that you have to change. We can never change that. Unless it would be a worldwide effort, not an American effort, nothing will ever change. It's heartbreaking, but nothing much we can do until you change the culture. Yeah, thanks for that, Ed. And I'm sure that's accurate, right? I don't have anything to say to contest that. This is it feels like a very calloused thing to say, right? That the United States cannot be the bucket for all of the burdens of the world. There's just not enough capacity to do that. And so you feel that every time that you look at these people who want to come across the southern border and come into the United States, and it just breaks your stinking heart. And you want to figure out a way that you can help them, right? And so the United States wants to be a good nation. I think that's what we want to do. But there are some efforts where our ROI, our return on our investment, is not good. And the Middle East has been one of those areas. What else could we do to improve the world if we didn't spend the last 20 years just kind of working towards a lost cause? Maybe we could have done more to help the world if we weren't so bogged down there. Thank you for the context there. It's Ed. I appreciate that. We have Lauren S. says, whatever happened to minding our own business? Well, I don't know. That happened internationally. That went away out the window internationally a long time ago. And now we don't even have it domestically. Can't even mind our own business now. We have Soul Viking says the U.S. can take credit for the fall of Libya and the devastating after effects. Heart goes out to the innocent Afghani people for what has happened and what is to come. It's heartbreaking. Yeah, it is heartbreaking, man. They're people. They're human beings over there. And so it's not, as easy. Well, we've been over there for 20 years. Good luck. Well, we were over there, right? We those people, some of those people in those pictures, they were born when the United States was there. And they were relying on the United States to provide some security. And now the United States is not there anymore. And they're like, what? Our whole lives. I'm 16 years old. My whole life you've been here. And now you're gone. And my mom and I are just sitting here. And we've got the Taliban who are going to come in here, kill me, and rape her. Okay, great. Thanks, United States. And so that's why, every time there's intervention, like the government causes so many problems and unintended consequences. They break things that they can never fix. And then the world suffers as a result, and it just angers the hell out of me. All right, next up, we've got Sergeant Bob says, the end game for terrorism is to possess the podium. I forgot about that. Yeah, so I forgot. Yeah, silly me. It's obvious, right? They want to capture the podium, the speaker's podium of the House of Representatives, the one that the insurrectionists almost got. Almost lost America on January 6th, folks. Thankfully, we're here. Bin Laden is dead, another one says, let's extract those local who aided the U.S. military and welcome them to our country. We got a few more here. Says, do not read this. Okay, that was from Arnie. Yes, okay, you're right. Yeah, so I can't read that. So Arnie gave me the full context of the full Trump quote, and he gave the statement that I said YouTube has a problem with. So that's why, you're right. I would not have read that one, Arnie B5. It's hilarious. He can't really post a comment or post something without saying that line. So almost everything he posts, well, you can't. It's just hysterical. All right, so those were great questions. A couple more super chats I saw come in. We have one here from Eddie Oliver. Nope, I already got that one, Eddie. And I got another chat over here from Eddie. This one from Texas says, everybody knew this was going to happen. The government was weak. They thought they could use special ops and mercenary, but it collapsed faster. We have, first of all, I'll take your word for it. I mean, it sounds like, these decisions are sort of made hastily, and then they sort of create the framework on the back end. It's like you set a goal and I'll figure out how to do it later. Doesn't work like that when you're trying to remove 4,000 employees from an embassy and you tell them just get a U.S. Airlines flight. Get out of here. All right. Eddie Oliver chatted, said, Osama bin Laden was upset with the U.S. occupation of the Middle East. That's why 9/11 happened, right? And you hear that a lot. A lot of people say, well, maybe if the U.S. wasn't so meddlesome in everybody else's business, that maybe they wouldn't, have such a problem with another foreign country occupying your land for the last 20 years, right? I'd be pretty angry about that myself if somebody came into my hometown and did the same thing. But we have different cultures, don't we? We have different lives, different economics. We have different liberties, different freedoms, different human values, and a lot there. So it's more complicated than just that. All right, those were great questions. Thank you for all of those. And I love the super chats. Awesome questions over from locals. Shout out to the chats over there. Let's see what's going on. We've got Jack Elias now in the house. Sweet Poe, Tay Toe, Thunder 7. We got Farmer's Daughter signed up, joined in. I see her in there. Wide Awake 95. 3 girlies. Over on YouTube, we've got A Straight and Narrow. We got K-Bean, Molly Jonty. We got Vijaya. We have Curtis Bartle and Zorro and many others. I really do appreciate all of the questions on that segment. Very good discussion. Look forward to some more on the next one. All right, so let's get into the next segment of the day, shall we? Believe that was it on that one. Oh, that's right. We're moving on. Illegal vaccination cards. These are now becoming a scourge. The FBI is issuing some pretty serious warnings. If you have one, or if you were somebody who's manufacturing one, well, you might be in possession of an illegal government document that might warrant 5 years in prison under the U.S. Code. So today, we're going to take a look at what is happening with this story. We have different vaccination cards. I'm going to show you specifically what they look like and why they might be problematic. The FBI came out, and they are now issuing very stern warnings, and so we have to break this down. Let's start off by taking a look at what is happening. This is a picture that came from, I forget what news article this came from, but we'll get to it here in a second. Now, you see, it looks like a regular vaccination card, right? Something that you may remember from grade school. And so when you have a COVID-19 vaccination card, right, handwritten, you have a CDC logo here, which is going to be problematic. We're going to talk about why. And then you have here, first dose. Second dose. And you've got a signature here from Dr. Julie Mazzi. Okay, Dr. Julie Mazzi is somebody who was charged here for violating the U.S. Code. And we're going to take a look at what her case looks like and then compare it and contrast it with some other people. So Dr. Julie Mazzi was signing these cards, apparently was printing them up, right? This is not an official card. Slapped the CDC logo on there and then had some text in here. And so we're going to take a look at it a little bit closer. Here is another one, right? This is somebody else who wrote a healthcare professional or something site, CUS, initialed on that. We got the Pfizer number. We got a number here, along with some other dates. Says, please keep this record card, which holds medical information about the vaccines you received. Said again in Spanish down here. And again, we have the CDC logo here. Now, the AP is reporting that this is problematic. As this continues to percolate throughout the country, we've got worried college officials. We have worried FBI agents, as we're going to take a look at as well. So now we're seeing that there are a growing number of colleges, universities, they're requiring proof of the COVID-19 vaccination cards. But now the new mandate has opened the door for those opposed to it to cheat the system, right? According to interviews. Both faculty and students at a dozen law schools saying that they're concerned about how easy it is to get these fake cards. Across the internet, a cottage industry has sprung up to accommodate people who say they won't get vaccinated for personal or religious reasons. Instagram account, which is probably now deleted, long deleted, was selling these cards for as little as $25 a piece. And another user on the encrypted app Telegram, those were going for $200 a piece. And, the FBI is not happy about this. Neither is law enforcement. So I want to show you what's going on here and break this down. We've got two sort of different scenarios happening here. One, we've got kind of one of the more egregious cases of this, where there is somebody who's sort of, claiming to be a medical doctor. Well, we're going to get to the story and show you what that looks like. But on the other end of the spectrum, right, on the other ends of, I would sort of categorize the spectrum as the severity of this allegation, right, the fake COVID allegation. We have some people who are really sort of, passing these out, signing them off as like they're medical doctors. Some other people, it sounds like, are sort of just selling these like fake IDs, right? It's just a printed piece of paper. It's $25. That's all you need. It's like a Post-it note. Well, in Honolulu, two gentlemen were arrested. We can see here Norbert Chung. We also have Trevor Chung. They were arrested out of Honolulu. The Attorney General's office is not revealing much about the case, so we can't spend much time on this one. But we are going to look into one that came out from the DOJ. Both of these guys were arrested after a tip came in from the community, okay? So that means that they're selling these cards and somebody was reporting them. So Robert Chung and his son, little father and son operation here, both arrested Sunday, August 8th, this past weekend. Prior to this Sunday, there were many, many hours put into the investigation that culminated on Sunday to where we are today. This was a special agent of criminal investigations from the Department of Attorney General, right? This is the chief law enforcement entity there. The attorney for Chung said that after the pair was arrested, they flew back to California, were tested negative, then flew back to Oahu, where they're going through the court system. So they are actively now prosecuting these things. And I've said for a long time, right, there's going to be a whole new category of crimes that comes out. We see this all the time. There's just sort of a new thing that comes out. And now what we got is COVID crimes. We're going to see COVID criminal trespassing. If you say I'm vaccinated, they let you in. Turns out you're not. Probably charge you with the trespass. They might charge you in some states. Gavin Newsom was comparing these things to drunk driving, to DUIs, saying that you don't have a right to drive a car drunk, just like you don't have a right to, I guess, walk around outside now without, complying with these mandates. So we're seeing the criminalization of this. We're seeing the idea that if you are somebody who pushes back, creates a little bit of friction here. In these cases, right, we're talking about, outright, counterfeiting of government documents. It's a different context. But we're talking about removing those little frictions, right? If they allow these fake vaccination cards to proliferate, well, then that's going to hurt the mandate efforts. And so they're going to clamp down on those, right? They want people to get mandated, so they're going to clamp down on these, of course. So the DOJ now, we rewind the clock back a little bit. Now that we're seeing more of these, let's see what happened back in July 14th. This was the first of these types of cases. This one was involving a woman named Julie Mazzi. She was 41, out of Napa, California. And she was actually a licensed naturopathic doctor. She was arrested. She had this scheme now to sell these homeoprophylaxis immunization pellets. Okay, so she actually was creating these pellets to falsify the vaccination cards. And she signed the one that we showed you previously, this one right here. This was a Julie Mazzi signature. All right, so back in this highlight, what she was doing, 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of false statements. First ever federal criminal fraud prosecution related to the homeoprophylaxis immunizations. Fraudulent CDC records show. All right, so in this complaint, what we can see here is this was now filed by Victoria Swartz. Now, normally we look at a lot of these on this channel, right? A lot of these criminal complaints. We spend a lot of time looking at these things. Most of the time, they are signed off on this line here. This says special agent from the HHSOIG, Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. Normally we see FBI agent, special FBI agent, DEA agent, right? Or some sort of law enforcement agency. This is from Health and Human Services. 2 counts, wire fraud, false statements, signed off on here by U.S. Magistrate Judge out of the Northern District of California, USA, versus Julie Mazzi. I, Victoria Schwartz, a special agent with HHS, do declare. So we're enabling Health and Human Services through the CDC to now basically abscond people's properties from them. Just say, no, that's our house now. Thank you. Well, they're not paying their rent. We know. We know you haven't been compensated. We don't care. That's our house. You say, well, that's not really your jurisdiction. You're the Center for Disease Control. You don't have any authority over property rights. Yes, we do. Okay. So now we have Health and Human Services. Traditionally, law enforcement, FBI, special agents enforce the law. But just like the CDC, a subset of the HHS is now responsible for property rights in America. They're also going to be gobbling up some more power, which is filing criminal charges against people. So you see how this slow creep is just slowly extending out. Every time that the government gets a little bit of power, they just want to take a little bit more and a little bit more. And so you're probably going to see a lot more of these complaints coming from Health and Human Services now, because we have an entirely new entity that really has, in many ways, more power than other government branches. So what happened here in this case? We have Mazzi. She's a licensed naturopathic doctor. She's in the state of California. The investigation revealed that she had a scheme going on where she used interstate wires, made false statements, and she was giving people these homeoprophylaxis immunizations, right? So they would be homeopathic prophylaxis. So prophylaxis would mean that you take it in order to prevent you from getting something, and homeopathic would mean it's natural, right? It's not something that's produced in a pharmacy, or it's not a pharmaceutical. So what they would do then, or what she would do, is fabricate these vaccine record cards, falsify these things. She would offer these immunization records, claim that the state of California approved of them. When they did their investigation, she expanded her operation during the COVID-19 pandemic, offered and sold those things over interstate lines, fraudulently claimed in a consensually monitored and recorded telephone call that these pellets would cause lifelong immunity for COVID-19. They're telling customers that there was a very minute amount of this in there and that it could result in infectious symptoms, but your immune system would automatically flag for attention and you would be immunized, right? So just total nonsense. And it says here that based on the information obtained from the FDA, Mazzi's representations were false and fraudulent because there was no remedy that provides lifelong immunity. Exposing somebody to the virus is not an authorized treatment. And something like this is, the FDA is saying that vaccines are safe and effective. Okay, so what she did, you can also see here that she actually put this whole little pamphlet together. And so she was making this a part of her practice. She would say the first day of dosing, 200C are given once a day. Then the second day of dosing, 3 times in one day. Avoid touching the pellets. The homeopathic all of this is bad, not good medical information, which of course is why she's being charged with a crime. Right, so don't follow any of that. This is all nonsense because it is not based in science. Right, she's saying that she's creating these pellets, and the whole thing's fraudulent, of course. So they came out, and here's what they're saying happened. The investigation began as a result of a complaint. Somebody from the public went and complained, falsely stated that the family had received Moderna, the vaccine. The initial complaint was corroborated by other complaints from the different members of the public. Somebody called in, complained, said family members told her that the pellets contained the virus and would create an antibody response. However, none of that stuff is true, right? She had different family members mark the cards falsely to state that they were clear. They were in the okay. So now she's being charged with a crime. But they're different crimes than what the FBI is warning us about, okay? So here what we can see in this slide that we've got these 2 U.S. code violations: wire fraud, right, for engaging in fraud across interstate lines, and then false statements related to healthcare. So these are the 2 actual charges. We got 18 U.S. Code 1343 and 1035. But then when we get over to the actual warning now that we get from the FBI, here is what that looks like. And it is a different section of the U.S. Code. So let me show you that. Here is the warning from the FBI. They're not happy about any of this. They say, if you make or buy a fake COVID-19 vaccination record card, you endanger yourself, those around you, and you are breaking the law. Oh my goodness, that is a stern warning from the FBI. Now, DHS, Office of Inspector General, who we just saw filed the complaint against the other lady, Mazi, and the FBI, they're advising the public to be aware of individuals that are selling fake COVID-19 vaccination records. Fake records have been advertised on social media, as well as e-commerce platforms and blogs. They say that these cards are intended to provide the recipients of the vaccine information about the type of vaccine they received, when they may be able to receive a second dose. If you did not receive the vaccine, do not buy fake vaccine cards. Do not make your own vaccine cards. Do not fill in blank vaccination record cards with false information. FBI is mad. By representing yourself as vaccinated when entering schools, mass transit, workplaces, or gyms or places of worship, you put yourself and others around you at risk of contracting COVID-19. But is that true? Because I thought that even if you were vaccinated, you could also still transmit it. So, at risk of contracting COVID-19. Well, just because you have the card doesn't mean you actually have the COVID. Right? You actually have to have COVID and the fake card. Just because you have the fake card doesn't mean that you're necessarily murdering grandma. You also got to have COVID. And you can also have COVID if you are vaccinated, as we know with the breakthrough cases. So you get the card and you're vaccinated and you can still kill grandma. So I'm not sure where the difference in the risks are, but maybe I'm missing something. I'm not as smart as the FBI. Additionally, the unauthorized use of the official government agency seal. There it is. Now, there's the seal that we're talking about. Okay, just being in possession of this unauthorized use of an official government agency seal, such as HHS or the CDC seal, is a crime, may be punishable under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1017, which we're going to take a look at. Now, they say, because individuals may use fake vaccine cards to misrepresent themselves as vaccinated, we strongly encourage businesses, schools, places of worship, and government agencies to follow CDC guidance. Continue to maintain social distancing. Continue to use personal protective equipment. If you did receive the vaccine, do not post photos of it anywhere. Your personal information will enable somebody to commit fraud. Any questions? Go to our guide. If you have anything to report, please report them to us. We actually set up a tip line now over at Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General, so you can report all of your COVID criminal activity to the FBI and to HHS now. Just report all of those people out there because you're just so angry about their status, I guess, as a person. You don't like the papers. You want to see their papers. They're not giving you the papers. You have doubts about their papers. Report them to the FBI. Now, if you're involved in that, of course, they're going to charge you, or they might. They're threatening to charge you. Who knows if it's actually going to go anywhere? But they say under 18 U.S. Code 1017, the government seal that is wrongfully used, if you wrongfully affix or impress the seal of any department or any agency of the CDC of the United States, including the CDC, upon any certificate, knowing that it's fraudulent with wrongful or fraudulent intent, well, you're in trouble now. You shall be fined under this title and imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. 5 years under U.S. Code 1017. Pretty stiff penalty there. Well, so we're talking about COVID crimes. And here we are. All right, let's take a look at some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. See if you've got anything to say on this segment. Let me pull that up here and see what we've got. We got some questions. Let's see what's here. We have No Doubt says, oh, that was from the last segment, says it's like deja vu. I saw that. Oh, yeah, oh, they must have. Okay, here we go. Sergeant Bob says, comment of a criminal. Never let an opportunity go to waste. Next is government IDs with holograms, etc. Or it's going to be just tech, right? It's just technology. And I think we're seeing that in Australia. We're seeing that in New York City. They're talking about, apparently they have some Excelsior app or something like that Cuomo was talking about and de Blasio was talking about. So I think the goal is to get it digitized because they want to know where you're at all the, like, check in here at this restaurant, check in here, go to this grocery store. It's conditioning. It's like the TSA really made sure that they could protect us all against terrorism, right? And so they were going to go in there and, scan our naked bodies, and that was going to help make the country safer, right? Yeah. And so now what they want to do is they really like that level of control, but they can only kind of do that at certain junctures in society when you're traveling internationally or domestically. But now, because the CDC can just take your houses and they can just kind of do whatever they want, including filing criminal charges now against you for COVID crimes, well, why don't they just also get to know where you're at all the time? And you just have to check in with them and make sure you're comporting with the government. Show me your papers everywhere you go. So that's fun. Good country. We have another one here from Aircraft Mech says, as long as they force vaccination for something that has a high survivability, then the fakes will exist. That's accurate. No Doubt says, in case you didn't realize, the deja vu comment was about the Afghanistan section. I did. I caught that. And that was on the last segment. We have Three Girlies says, so the government, yet again, hasn't figured out that the prohibition doesn't work. Didn't work for alcohol, didn't work for drugs, didn't work for sex, didn't work for workers, didn't work for vaccines. The free market will always find a way around the prohibition. Three Girlies, you're absolutely right, which is why, oftentimes things will get a little bit down and dreary on the show. We talk a lot about some pretty heavy topics here, but, the idea that we're in this downward spiral and that all is going to be lost, I think, maybe there's going to be some darkness before we get to some light, but there is still a lot of freedom inherent in the human spirit that will never allow the totalitarians to win. They may win in certain areas or over certain epochs, and people might have to pick up and move to different locations, but the point is freedom is what wins at the end of the day. The good guys are on the side of freedom. The censors are the bad guys. The totalitarians are the bad guys. The guys that want to know where you are every second of the day and monitor your movements and make sure you're not offensive to anybody and maintain your social media presence and kick you off if you're being too rude. All of that are the bad guys. And the human spirit wants freedom. And so there's always tentacles that will emerge whenever there's a clampdown, and we're going through it right now. We're seeing this happen in real time. Locals and Rumble are building a new platform. The crypto space is exploding all over the place. People are tired of being suppressed. They want freedom, and they're going to get it one way or the other, which is a good thing. We have Soul Viking says, I guess Dr. Julie Mazzi forgot that the vial is only so large, 5 to 10 doses, when she was working on her copier to death. The vial number can be traced back to the patient. Yes. So when she was working her copier to death. Yeah. So he noticed that, right? The CDC logo was like Xerox like 55 times. It's a good point, Soul Viking. Next up, we have Baaloha says, Arnold said, screw your freedom. So that's where we are. I saw that, and that really sort of broke my heart a little bit. Arnold, every single 5 years, every decade, he goes from my childhood hero to my arch enemy in America, right? From somebody who I used to read his book as a boy, the Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, Modern Bodybuilding. I have it up there somewhere, and it's a fantastic book. I'm not a bodybuilder, but I was a boy. I liked the pictures in there, the picture book, and it really inspired me. He did a lot of stuff with the Special Olympics. I happen to have a Down syndrome brother. I really admired the man for coming as an immigrant and turning himself into a superstar and governor of California. Turns out he's not quite the amazing, freedom-loving American that many of us thought he was. He is turning into sort of the standard traditional ruling class, moron, which is a sad, sad thing. But oh well, whatever, right? Another one dying down. We have a Center for Disinformation Control says, too big, no security features at all. Kind of like ballots. Too many people have blank ones. Need to chip everyone for vaccines and votings. Yeah, so just kind of tag them like little animals that they treat us like. We have TOS Forever says, is this why VP Harris stated that some Americans need Kinkos to learn to use printers? Number 2, is this how much the French vaccine cards are racist to require money, Kinkos, and printers on a farm? Beer 19 permeates paper, so maybe it can be a way of replacing jabbing with a jabber. What? I don't know what most of that meant. French vaccine cards are racist. So I don't know what's going on in France. I saw a video in France where the police were walking around outside of. I've been to France. I've been to Paris, and I was just like, and people are just like, oh yeah, here you go. Here, let me have my cafe. Here, showing them the little thing. I'm going, what is happening? All right, but France is lost. That's okay. We have Peely Wally says, imagine falsified Vax cards causing such outrage. What about falsified death certificates that said people died of COVID when it wasn't the main cause of death? What a mess of an existence. Yeah, that's a good point. Baaloha says, also, You would think that they would put a unique QR code on them. You knew that they were going to do this from the jump. Yeah, no question about it. Like, this is where all this was going. We have Grandma's here. Grandma says, oh, it's so sad. Grandma says, please don't let them kill me. Get your vax. That's from Grandma. Well, Grandma, listen. Good luck, Grandma. Good luck. That's not that persuasive. Good luck. NY Renal MD says, if people don't want to be vaccinated, that's their right. However, falsifying paperwork is illegal. This ND, not MD, would say patients had a Moderna vaccine when she did not administer the vaccine. Yeah, right. That's not appropriate. Right? I'm not condoning that. I'm not trying to insinuate that I support fake vaccination. Right? First of all, I don't condone breaking the law, ever. But I do condone enforcing your rights. And the two sometimes, they can get a little bit frictiony when they come into that interface together. And that's where it can be challenging, which is why I have a law enforcement interaction training available at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler, where you can learn the 1, 2, 3 rule. All right. So thank you for that, Doc. We have another one here. Gail says, yeah, digitized vaccine information is going to work really great for my 82-year-old grandmother and her flip phone. Yeah, well, Gail, Kamala Harris is on that one. So but that's a Kinko's problem. I don't know, I think Kamala's on this one, so maybe she'll solve that like she solves the border. But you're right. There are going to be a lot of people that can't comport with that or can't comply. Or what about certain demographics in this country that don't want any part of it? How are they going to continue to engage in the economy in New York City when they say you have to be vaccinated and high percentages of certain demographics are not? That means it's going to be pretty dang racist to them if they can't go and participate in New York City, isn't it? Pato says, I'm from Washington State, and the Governor Inslee just mandated that all healthcare workers are to get the jab by October 18th. They are even threatened that they could pull their providers. Wow, that's insane. It's going to come to the point where being unvaxxed is criminalized. Yep. My wife is an RN, and we just feel gut punched. Wow. That's from Pato. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to hear that, Pato. What do you do, right? What do you do in a situation like that? You really have to weigh a lot of unfortunate choices. Livelihood, career, everything you've been working for. The government just mandates something and now you have to follow their orders or they're going to take that away from you. Everything you worked for. Your license? That'll probably happen for lawyers at some point, right? We'll probably get into a situation where the judges say, if you want to come into my courtroom, you got to be vaccinated. And there will be an absolute reckoning in the courts, because I know a lot of defense attorneys, myself included, that will not appreciate that one bit. And we'll see where that goes. But in the meantime, what are you supposed to do, right? You're an RN. Fortunately, I have a company that I run, so I can have some of those decisions for now until the federal government or the local state government tells me that I cannot. But what about these other major institutions like hospitals that require nurses? And now they say you've got to do it or else. And I read somewhere that nurses and PhDs and other people who are sort of in the system to a higher degree, that have a lot of education, that are familiar with what is happening, are choosing not to get vaccinated. And so what happens, Pato, if you and your wife, she makes the decision that, not for me. We lose a very good nurse and a great family, and something else is going to have to give. We're seeing shortages across the board. Maybe that's part of the plan. I don't know. But it's a tragedy. We have another one here from Jeremy Matrita says, so we need penalties for fake IDs for everything except when it comes to voting. That's right. You don't even need an ID to vote. It's not that important. It's very important that we know your medical status and what you put in your body. That's incredibly important. And if you think that that's bad, well, you're a lunatic. But if we try to have a little bit of integrity and know who voted and when and where they're living and where they're coming from and all of those different things, just to make sure that they're like an actual citizen and a legitimate person, and it's a one-to-one connection between their ballot and their identity, that is just like insane. There's no way we can do that. It's really difficult, and you're a racist if you even suggest it. Meanwhile, it's mandatory that you do all of these other things in other areas of our society. Why is that? We have John Delar says, the Democrats are becoming everything they claim to hate. They are big brother and they are turning evil. I remember when they used to be libertarian minded or liberty minded, right? They liked big government for a lot of the social solutions, but they were typically the free speechers and the free associationers and the people that were, championing on Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Like, finally, we're seeing some corruption being exposed. All that is gone. Where is Dennis Kucinich now? All right, we have some other ones from Sweet Potato. Can you change the CDC logo like 10% and call it art? It's a clever little angle there. I don't think that the OIG from Health and Human Services would take that kindly, Sweet Potato. We have Miss Lucky says, hey, Rob, I wonder what will happen with people coming into the U.S. with a different COVID pass. How will they verify those? It's a good question, Miss Lucky. So we see some of this. An analogy would be like with driver's licenses, right? So this happens all over the place. In Arizona, we will accept international driver's licenses as driver ID in most situations, and we'll even consider them to be valid ID as long as they have sort of 5 criteria on there. And I forget what they are, but it's sort of, name, date of birth, ethnicity, height, weight, eyes, or what, something like that. Like if it has those 5 factors, Arizona says, okay, good enough for us. And so there's probably going to be rules to that effect. Well, if you have a vaccine card from, India, and it says that it came from this agency and it has these different indicia about what brand you got, what date you got it, and, whatever, what doctor signed off on it, then the rules would say, well, that's good enough for us, right? We'll honor that. So it'd probably be a very similar system. Good question. Thunder7 says, since the virus came from China, they can at least provide fake ID cards to anyone who doesn't want to get jabbed. So they are excellent at counterfeiting. Yeah, they can just, when they send over their infected spies to Eric Swalwell's hotel, they can just come over with a fake ID card. They can give him COVID, they can steal all of our national secrets, and they can also just spread around their fake COVID ID cards. It's a good idea, right? And you can save on shipping because shipping rates have inflated dramatically under the Biden administration. So they can kind of bundle those things up together. We have It's Ed says, you probably can't read this, but the CDC released some research papers. Let's see. Yeah. This is why the government is really pushing the vaccine. Yeah. That's a good question. It's Ed. You're right. I probably shouldn't talk about any of that. So sorry for having a little behind the scenes conversation here. Quick summation of the comment, but it's basically sort of, playing around with some of the motivations behind why the government is so insistent on mandating these vaccines and some of these regulatory underlying motivations. The underlying motivations are sort of manifesting themselves in the regulations. Why is that happening? Talking about the effects of the vaccine versus the virus. It's complicated stuff. It's Ed, you're on Locals. I think this is a good comment to post over there because that's worth talking about. And sorry, I can't talk about it on YouTube. It's too bad. We have The Last Villain says, Arnold likes to be liked. All that muscle and no spine. Yeah, he kind of feels like that, right? Kind of still like that little boy who wants to be seen, wants a little bit of attention, just, wants to be admired. And so he just kind of flip-flops, right? I remember when he was really big into the environmental stuff, talking about all this stuff. And you're like, hey, dummy, you're driving a tank around. Okay. Lauren S. says, whatever happened to my body, my choice? Do I smell a double standard? Yes, you do. In fact, you do. Their argument is that, you get the vaccine so you don't kill other people. And you say, well, what are you doing with an abortion? Good question. We have TOS Forever says, foul is French for fake. Beer is jab is needles for the, okay. So that's why. So TOS Forever was using some vernacular. Faux is French for fake. We have beer is Corona for 2019. Got that. Jab is the needles for the vax. So I get it now. I'm sorry I botched that, TOS Forever. But there was a prior comment where I'm like, what is that language? And it's coded. It's encoded so that I don't get thrown right out of YouTube. I appreciate that, TOS Forever. I feel like I might have been kind of rude to your prior comment for saying that I don't know what you said. And what you were doing was very beneficial. You were encoding our language so that we could have meaningful conversations in this censored state that we live in. So I guess that's going to be the new world. We'll have to click and wink at each other and do our facial features, our facial expressions like Letitia James, get really very animated every time we communicate about the real issues. We have Genghis Khan is back, says, F you, Arnold, and the Vax passport, trying to restrict our freedom, you Nazis. That's from Genghis. Genghis is aggressive. Sergeant Bob says, I'm glad many of my suspects did not have your law enforcement interaction training. Having said that, It is 100% accurate. I hope in my retirement I never have to use it, but I know it. Thank you for that plug, Sergeant Bob. Yeah, it was fun. We have the 1, 2, 3 rule for all of your interactions with law enforcement. Might need to really know that now, that everything is now a COVID crime. We have NY Renal MD says, Robert, that RN already has to be vaccinated against MMR and polio. What is the difference? I think the difference probably is the new technology, right? mRNA, I think mRNA is a new platform. It's also something that I think has been objectively implemented quickly, right? Like the whole platform was built relatively quickly. Nobody thought it could be done at that quickly. And Operation Warp Speed made it happen. People have questions about the vaccine, largely because it's been politicized by both parties. I think that the Republicans did it. I think that the Democrats did it. We played a clip here on the show of Kamala and Joe Biden politicizing it before the election because they thought that Trump was going to get it done, come out with an October surprise, wow America with this new great release, say, hey, we got it done, we're safe, and win the election. So they were politicizing it in a way that, we haven't seen that with MMR or polio, at least not in my lifetime. Maybe it was politicized back when they first came out and that sort of, watered itself out. But here, the environment, the context, the conversation around the vaccines is entirely different than any other vaccine that I've ever gotten, right? I was a kid. I went to grade school. I'm sure I got all my shots and all of that stuff. But it's a whole different context. The entire environment has changed, and people have no reason to trust our government at all anymore. The CDC has changed its mind 55 times. They change it every month or so. And, Joe Biden, I'm going to beat the virus, comes out in July 4th. The whole world's changed. Everything's better now. Not so fast. Now it looks like we might be, rolling back into lockdowns again. So there are a lot of differences, I think, between the prior vaccines. A lot of people make that argument, that analogy. I respect it. I get it. And as a doctor, as somebody who is a clinician, right, it might be that simple for you, somebody who sees it that way. Oh, it's just like the other ones. It's obvious, right? You know the science, you know the technology, you know how it works, you see the effects of having it versus not having it. And so for you, it's a pretty clear decision. For many other people, not so much, maybe including that nurse. But it's a really good topic, and that's why it's so hard to, sort of rifle through these issues. We have Sweet Potato says, also Washington State, Rob, another one. Can you do a show just talking smack about the mandate? I'll get my popcorn. Yeah, we'll see. Well, probably, right? We're due up for another COVID show, but there's so much COVID news. I mean, everywhere I turn, it's just COVID all day. So we'll see. I think that as it starts to continue to roll out, I'm expecting, more mandates, probably a 2-tier system of lockdowns where if you're vaxxed, just like New York City, the NYC pass, the key to NYC is what they're calling it. If you're vaxxed, de Blasio said, you get to come out and enjoy all of the things that you love about New York City. But if you're not, unfortunately, you can't. And so rather than talking about, total lockdowns, Jen Psaki came out and said, we're not going to shut down the economy. What does that mean? It doesn't mean we're not going to shut down. It means we're not going to shut down the economy. What does that mean? Well, it means that you got this 2-tier system. If you're vaxxed, you get to go participate in the economy. That's going to remain open, but it's locked and it's not accessible to the unvaxxed. So we'll see more of these mandates continue to roll out. Last year in season 1 of COVID, we saw that it started in New York, bounced over to LA, and then spread around the country. Same thing basically happening right now. Season 2, it's terrible, even worse actors on the show, and I hate it. All right, so we'll probably get around to that, Sweet Potato. We got 3 Girlies says, I was watching a new show on Fox this morning. Bill Hemmer was talking about how he had forgotten his vaccine card at home, was denied entry into a concert. Then someone told him about an app from Pfizer. The app allowed him to pull up his vaccine information, and he was allowed entry into the concert. We've already created a way to verify vaccines via Big Pharma. Wow. Okay, well, I guess that's how he's going to live his life. We got Want to Know says, how many college kids that are ruined going to commit suicide now? A lot. Suicide rates are up. Overdose deaths are up. Everything's up. There's a mental health crisis well underway. And guess what? Our current government is perpetuating it. We've got 6-year-old kids with masks on in their face in violation of Arizona law right now. In school. They just go to school, masks on your face all day as 5 and 6-year-old kids. All day. I don't sit at my desk with a mask on my face all day. The law in Arizona says that's not acceptable, but the schools made the decision that they're going to follow CDC guidance anyways, and they're just going to do it anyways. Parents be damned. You're seeing this all around the country. People are screaming at the school boards. hey, morons, what you're talking about is not backed by reality. And it just keeps working. It keeps going on anyways, right? Because all of these bureaucrats are trying to justify the system. We talked about the system justification theory, right? It's a bias. Once you're in the system and you've been propping up the system, right? The last thing that anybody from the government can do is come out and say we were wrong about anything. Would never happen. So they've got this thing that they have to continue to beat our faces in for the foreseeable future. We have Jeremy Matrita here says, I recently watched a video about how people proved identity in historical times. We need a crypto ID wallet where every personal piece of data can be completely under our control. We can validate what we choose to disclose. Digital rights for the win. Yeah, it's an interesting idea there, Jeremy. There's a lot of that taking place in crypto. And even ideas like you'll be able to just sort of move your entire online persona. It's yours. You can move it kind of wherever you want, right? So right now we're broadcasting on YouTube. We've got amazing subscribers over here, amazing people in the chat, commenting away, having a lot of fun, but they are stuck to YouTube. What if I could say, well, those are kind of connected to me. So if I don't like YouTube, if YouTube starts censoring us, maybe we just kind of pick up and move to a different platform, right? Move the whole skeleton over to someplace else because it's all connected to you rather than the platform. There's a lot of ideas like that that are just in the infancy stages. So we'll see where it goes. We have Ted Offensive says, hey, Rob, if I caught slinging fake Vax cards, would you represent me? Absolutely. Happy to. Don't do that, but I'd be happy to represent you. We have F the Gestapo says, and I can't put that one on there. Let's see. Gladys is trying to spy on us with QR codes. Gladys Berkajan. And it says making it compulsory as well as sending in troops and Gestapo for the compliance. That must be in Australia. Don't care if people will break the rules because they are Nazis. Yeah, right. It's a little bit of that friction there. We'll see what happens here in Arizona and the rest of the United States. Let's see here. That was from a prior segment. So we're going to jump over that one. We have Aircraft Mech says, I see here in other channels the concern for what YouTube thinks. Imagine the environment 10 to 20 years from now. Not laughing, are you? I see here in other channels the concern for what YouTube thinks. Imagine this environment 10 to 20 years from now. Not laughing, are you? Yeah. Yeah. And that's why people are going to bail, right? It's either going to correct itself or the meaningful conversations are just going to leave. And we've seen that time many, many times, right? It happens before. Facebook, YouTube, Google, they're all big until they're not anymore. And we saw, like the MySpace to the Facebook transition. MySpace was there, gone. Friendster, gone. All of these different things, gone. And one of the methodologies that might actually work well here is you create alternative systems where you don't have to rely on advertising. And we're already seeing these with different platforms like Odyssey, which sort of reward creators with a currency that is actually on the platform. We can go all day on that. Very interesting. All right, we have over here, It's Ed says, mRNA vaccines have been around for a while. Zika, rabies, flu shots, been used for a while. The Pfizer and Moderna use this tech. J&J uses a different approach. Uses an RNA instruction that causes the SARS-2 spike protein, which then triggers an immune response. This is the same tech that is used for the Ebola antivirus medication. Both should be safe since the tech is being used. I just don't like that I'm being pressured to do it. Yeah, right. And so, right, I'm not a medical doctor or a scientist or any of those things. But I think when I was responding to the prior comment from the good doctor, I was sort of comparing and contrasting it to the conversations around prior vaccines, that this is something, accurate or not, people are sort of considering this to be an experimental vaccine because that's the official standard that it is. And so whether it's rightly or wrongly being perceived as something that is new tech or not, whether that's accurate or not, I think the perception still exists is my point. And thank you for the clarification. I did not know that. That's a good comment. We have here, Aircraft Mech says, everything surrounding the virus has been worse than the virus itself. Yes, as the government usually does things. We're going to go fix that. We're going to go fix the border because it was very racist. Look what they've done. We're going to go fix Afghanistan because American security and international order. Look what they've done. It's a disaster all the time. We have here, Ba Aloha says, have you looked into the study that shows more educated people are more hesitant about the vaccine? PhDs are the most skeptical. High school grads are most likely to just take it. I did see that study, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because I heard that a bunch of dumb Republicans were the only people not getting vaccinated. No Doubt says, if you haven't already read it, you'd probably like the book Life After Google. Yeah, that sounds like a really good book. I just downloaded the Kevin Mitnick book about going digitally silent or something like that. I forget what it is. We have Baloha says, and the username is pronounced ba, like a sheep says, and the blend it with aloha. Baloha. Baloha. I'm gonna work on it. V Enticus Prime has reminded me for about 2 weeks about how to say it, and I still botch it. So you might have to remind me on that. Baloha. We're gonna try it. All right. So those were great questions. All of those came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. I think a couple other super chats came in. Let's see here. Yeah, we saw that one from Eddie. Brody Z says, wasn't there an article in a study written earlier this year which stated that the vaccine would also cause mutations? So how many cards will we need? Yeah, so I see what you're saying. Yeah, so I think that there was an article that was written about that. I certainly don't, want to offer any medical advice or medical information. That's not the point of the show. But I think what you're talking about are the news the news article, some of the stories that came out that have hinted that they're expecting many more of these variants, right? And as the variants continue to develop and evolve, many people are speculating that the vaccines will lose some efficacy there. And so that's why they're talking about booster shots and things of that nature. We have Newbie of Death review stuff, says that Mustaine music is better than Metallica. Yeah, I liked a couple songs from Metallica. I wasn't really a Metallica guy. I really liked Megadeth and a lot of those other bands in comparison to Metallica. Megadeth, and who was the other one? There was another one. There's a lot of those. I listened to a lot of that music when I was a very angry teenager. And Wolfgang says, Afghanistan was a quick win, quick in, quick out. Try another World Trade Center terrorist try. We can destroy an entire country and disappear like ghosts in the night. That's from Wolfgang. I like that. Anytime you can end a sentence with like ghosts in the night, it's a pretty good sentence. One more came in from locals. This is that's on the Prince Andrew comment. So we're going to jump into that segment. I forgot we have a whole nother segment. Oh my goodness. A whole nother segment. Woo! All right. Well, we're going to amp it up for this final segment because we're talking about Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. All right. So Prince Andrew still under investigation here in the United States and now even in the UK. I want to go through this article because the Chief Commissioner, her name is Cressida Dick over there in the UK. She is now hinting that they're going to be doing an investigation into Prince Andrew. Now, the title here, the headline from Neon Nettle says that it kind of makes it sound like they're going to be doing something, but we're going to listen here a little bit more closely. So we're going to look at the story. Earlier in the week, we talked about Prince Andrew. We know he has sort of been involved with the Epsteins for a long time. We had that very awful picture of him kind of hugging that 17-year-old girl, allegedly in a hotel with Ghislaine Maxwell that was provided by Jeffrey Epstein. Well, a long time has elapsed. This story is that Prince Andrew slept with a underage woman who was trafficked for the purposes of sex and then covered the whole thing up. Fast forward to today, Virginia Giuffre filed a lawsuit in the United States, and we've been asking ourselves here in this country, is this going to uncover anything about this extended conspiracy that was going on in the highest order, the highest levels of our government, the UK government, probably many other world governments involving Epstein, involving these trafficking of very young underage girls for the purposes of sex? Are we ever going to get to the bottom of this? Jeffrey Epstein was incarcerated. His case was going to be moving forward. And then conveniently, everything went wrong. Jeffrey Epstein clearly didn't kill himself, but ended up dead anyways because some guards were asleep, some cameras were off, and the whole thing fell apart. So many of us were saying, dang it, we wanted some answers on this. Ghislaine Maxwell also got arrested. She was in hiding for some bit. And now many people are looking at this new lawsuit and salivating, saying, hey, maybe we're going to get some new information from this Prince Andrew. So now, Virginia Giuffre filed a lawsuit. The lawsuit is well underway. But the question that has been on everybody's mind is, so what? This is the Prince of the UK. He is the Duke of York, and he is not going to respond to anything that the U.S. prosecutors or a U.S. civil court demand of him. So now, over in the UK, they are telling us that they are also going to be doing an investigation. This is this woman here. Her name is Cressida Dick. She is an investigator, and she was on an interview. You can see here she's the commissioner from the Metro police officer, says that Prince Andrew is, in fact, under investigation, according to the UK police. She said, quote, no one is above the law. They're acknowledging that UK authorities are now investigating allegations that he raped a teenager who was trafficked to him for sex by convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of really terrible words in that sentence. London Metro Police Commissioner has confirmed. So she says here that they were, quote, looking into the allegations, right? So this headline, this article sort of makes it sound like they're actually doing something. Let's listen in on the interview where these clips came from. Looking into, and quote, no one is above the law. So this lady, Commissioner Cressida, she was over here on this show. Let's listen in on how she is explaining what they were doing.
Have you seen the testimony or notes from the Duke of York's Royal Protection Team pertaining to the night of the allegation he strenuously denies, what took place in a London apartment?
So I really am not going to comment any further, Nick.
Someone's seen those notes.
I'm not going to comment any further.
Come on.
Is he above the law, the Duke of York?
No one is above the law.
So you're reviewing this case?
Absolutely. It's been reviewed twice before. We work closely with the CPS. We are, of course, open to working with authorities from overseas. We will give them every assistance if they want to, if they ask us for anything within the law, obviously.
And as a result of New York.
And as a result of what's going on,
Right.
I've asked my team to have another look at the material. No
Okay.
one is above the law.
All right. So there you go, right? The first headline, oh, yeah, we're looking into this, and an investigation is underway. But then you actually listen to the interview, and it's more like, I'm not going to comment on this. Dumb. You already asked me about this. I'm not commenting on it. And listen, no one is above the law. We are looking into it. We've already looked into it twice. Hello. And we'll look into it again. Okay, so you know what that means. It means we looked into it. We'll look into it again because everybody's asking us to. But we're going to find what we found the last two times when we also didn't find anything, probably intentionally because we didn't actually look or do anything. We're going to do that again. So I guess that's a good headline for the UK government. Yeah, we're looking into this. We're going to go investigate one of our own. But not really. All right, now this is, of course, causing some people in the United States to say, well, what the heck is going on here? Because this is one of our citizens that got sexually assaulted by your prince. And we have a strong interest in getting to the bottom of this, given the fact that Epstein is no longer with us and Maxwell is still in custody. So Guffrey, her lawyer, came out. His name was David Boies. We already talked about him earlier in the week. Said that the Duke is going to have to answer questions. Said the court process now is going to compel him. If he were to try to ignore the court the way he's ignored us, there would be a default judgment entered against him. That could be enforced in the United States or in England or elsewhere in the world. So I don't think he's going to ignore the court. And as a result, he's going to be held to account. So I read that and I thought, okay, well, that might be true, right? If they do file a lawsuit and he doesn't respond, yeah, maybe the court does issue a default judgment. It means you just sort of lose, right? Sometimes you think about this in terms of financials. If you have a bill to pay or a credit card bill and you just say, well, I'm going to pay $100 a month until I pay down the $1,000, and you stop making your payments and they say, well, you've defaulted on your loan. Now the whole $1,000 is due plus the rest of the interest. Right. And so that's sort of, if you're not going to play, they're just going to find in default against you. You just lose by default. We gave you a subpoena, we gave you a summons, and you got notice that this lawsuit is taking place over you, and you didn't show up to court. Therefore, you lose because you had proper service, you had proper notice that this was happening against you, and you didn't show up. So now you lose. So is that going to happen here? And that's what this attorney is saying, that there could just simply be a default judgment, right, against him. Well, the first question, this is kind of jumping over a couple very important preliminary issues. The first question is, does the court have any jurisdiction over the prince anyways in the first place? We talked about this a little bit earlier. The defense attorneys say that they do. I'm sorry, the plaintiff's lawyers, the people who are representing Virginia Guffrey, they say we have jurisdiction over him. Why? Because New York has a long-arm statute. If you come into New York and you try to do business in our state, which includes sexually assaulting young underage women, that means that you are availing yourself of our laws. And that gives us jurisdiction over you. Because Prince Anu, you were here raping 17-year-olds, you are acquiescing to our laws. That gives the court jurisdiction over you. And you can't just hide out in New England. And so if the court interprets it that way and says, yeah, if this is a valid lawsuit, we agree he was here, we agree that the court does have jurisdiction over the prince, then they could enter a default judgment. But what happens if if the courts don't find that they have that jurisdiction? If there's some sort of immunity, if the idea that these two totally separate systems of government where you have a separate prince of a foreign power, there are different ways that these things work. What that attorney was talking about may be totally appropriate if this, if a lawsuit takes place in New York and the defendant is also in New York, it's pretty easy to enter a default judgment. But here, we're talking about a foreign prince, and so it gets a little bit more complicated. I was looking into how this works, and I want to talk about what's something called a mutual legal assistance treaty, which would be this agreement between the U.S. and the U.K. to engage in an information sharing sort of a cooperation agreement. Is that something that is possible? Well, we know that currently there are some tensions about this between the two countries. The Independent is reporting that Prince Andrew and the refusal to talk to Epstein's investigators is straining relations between the UK and America. Fears over the issue of the Duke of York could affect wider efforts to collaborate in the future on high-profile cases. U.S. authorities are growing increasingly frustrated with Prince Andrew's failure to cooperate into their probe into the network surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. It's exacerbating tensions between Washington and London, but that's okay, right? He's a prince, so they get to jerk everybody around, I guess, just like our bureaucrats here do. People familiar with authorities' investigations into Epstein's business affairs told The Independent that the lack of information sharing had caused a diplomatic strain. They said in a new civil case that was brought by Virginia Giuffre, alleging that Duke of York sexually abused her, is going to add further strain over this issue, along with the prosecution of Maxwell, set to go on trial later this year. There are fears that this issue could sour broader efforts to collaborate on other cases, and the prince has specifically denied the allegations, of course. So the next question, sort of logically, okay, so if there are tensions here, how does this work? How do all of these things get sorted out? So I went over to the criminal resource manual at the DOJ website, and I looked this up. This is what's called a treaty request. You'll notice it says here, a mutual legal assistance treaty. It has the force of law. This is all a bunch of sort of manual stuff, so we're not going to spend much time on it, but it is an agreement, right? If you have somebody in a foreign country, you've got somebody here domestically, and you sort of go through this process where you enter into this mutual legal assistance of treaty. It has the force of law. It says it's faster and more reliable than other mechanisms. You consult with the office. You determine whether the U.S. has an MLAT with the country. So the U.S. most obviously has one of these with the U.K., but the question is, can they enforce this? Can this result? Can the U.S. government and the UK government enter into one of these MLATs? It's a mutual legal assistance treaty so that they can share information about this, so that the US government, through the US court system, through the civil lawsuit that was filed by Virginia Giuffre, can they start communicating some of those interrogatories, some of those requests for depositions through the MLAT over from the U.S. government to the U.K. government. It'll go through their legal system, and then they'll respond accordingly, right? It's sort of like a translator. You go to Google Translate English to Spanish. Well, you need that between the two different countries and the legal systems. And so we have an MLAT process, which is something I'm learning about, that is used as a mechanism to enable this to happen. Well, that sounds pretty reasonable. Sounds good. Okay, well, we've got a system now that we can use. Maybe the U.S. can get Prince Andrew to come over here and sit for a deposition or provide some more information about this. The only problem with this, of course, is that they already went down this route, and he said, get bent. We're not going to be complying. So this article I found was from last year. Just a little bit over a year ago, on June 8th, 2020, they tell us that U.S. prosecutors back then, you remember this, were sort of on season 2 of the Epstein saga, because during season 1, Jeffrey Epstein was working his way through the courts. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell is working her way through the courts, and we have a new addition, a new appearance of a character. Virginia Giuffre is also filing a civil complaint. So now we have this 1 year ago, when we were in season 1 going through this with Epstein, that it says advisors to Britain's Prince Andrew denied on Monday that he was refusing to cooperate into a Justice Department probe. This was after U.S. prosecutors back then, 1 year ago, made a rare request through a treaty with Britain to secure testimony from the prince. So they tried this. Prince Andrew's public relations advisors, they released a 2-page statement saying that the department, the DOJ under Trump, wasn't targeting the royal as part of its probe. The statement added that the prince has on at least 3 occasions offered his assistance. A person familiar with the matter said that the Justice Department had made an application under a mutual legal assistance treaty that could lead to Queen Elizabeth's second son being compelled to make a statement in a British court if he doesn't cooperate with the investigation. So now, naturally, I looked up after did anything happen with this? No, of course not, right? Jeffrey Epstein is now dead, and the inquiry that is surrounding that line of questioning is now kind of moot, right? The case against him is moot. So what do U.S. prosecutors need from the prince now that Jeffrey Epstein's dead, now that there's no criminal case going on against him? Nothing. So that whole thing just kind of evaporated into thin air, even though it was being tried. So now that we have some new questions being asked about this, we go back to the Independent. They tell us that these probes that are taking place now are significant. We're talking once again about the back and forth between the U.S. and the U.K. over these issues, about why they're not cooperating on the Prince Andrew stuff. Says these probes are significant not only for the legal proceedings related to Epstein, but also to those around Maxwell and her ongoing charges. It's also alleged that multiple authorities are seeking details of flights of the Duke of York that he used to visit Epstein, the different range of locations, so that they can understand how people may have traveled into and out of his orbit. And we talked about that earlier in the week. We had that map with the flights that were flying all over the place, right? All over the country, all over the world, really. It just looked like this, right? Different flights all over the place. The authorities' interests are understood to include multiple trips by the royal to his island, Little St. James, as well as Florida and New York, where he had his other properties. Last year, prosecutors in the Virgin Island alleged that Epstein abused hundreds of young women. The frustration over the Duke of York's lack of cooperation is said to be amplified by the fact that it appears unlikely that the royal would be extradited, right? Nothing's going to happen. His cooperation would therefore be a matter of bolstering diplomatic relations and sharing any information which could help to avoid the future trafficking of young women and girls. So they don't care about any of that, right? It's all, they can go, he can get out there in front of the cameras. Oh, I care about women's rights, right? Just like Cuomo did. No, I never meant to do those things, but you did for many years. Everybody knew that you did them. And so all of your bloviating about how much you care about women and how much you care about everybody who's been the victim of male, aggression is all BS. We know that. We can see it. Same thing goes on with this guy, right? Goes out and gives an interview. Oh yeah, we're going to help, blah, blah, blah. All show for the cameras. Soon as the pedal hits the metal, as they say, gone with the wind. All right, so we know. We'll see if anything happens there with the prince. I highly doubt it. Let's switch gears and do a quick recap on what's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell's case. Here is the docket from the last time that we looked at it. You'll notice that not a lot of activity, actually. We have a couple letters that were sent back and forth, and so I want to show you some of the things in particular. We're going to look at this order real quickly, not spend a ton of time on it because it's somewhat interesting. But let me give you some background on this. So we know that historically, previously, there was a back and forth about an op-ed that was written here. Remember when this guy wrote this? This was written by David Oscar Marcus, and he said, Bill Cosby is free. Ghislaine Maxwell should be free too. We talked about that. And he wrote this. He said, look, it's kind of the same thing. You know, Bill Cosby, what they did is they kind of entered into this non-prosecution agreement with him, said, we're not going to prosecute you. Then Bill Cosby started talking, said some things that incriminated him, and then they prosecuted him. Now, what David Marcus is saying here, similar thing happened with Maxwell. Epstein had this non-prosecution agreement that was supposed to insulate everybody in his orbit, which would have included Ghislaine Maxwell, and therefore she should be immune to that. That's what his argument says. Well, the U.S. government didn't like that. They did not appreciate that he wrote an op-ed, and so they submitted this document on July 1, saying that he violated this. You're not supposed to give extrajudicial public statements by attorneys who are on the case. And so they wanted the government to order Mr. Marcus to comply with Rule 23.1, which is a local rule, saying, don't stop it with your running your mouth. Okay, stop talking about this case. You're not allowed to do that. And so the court came out and they issued this order. This is kind of the really only interesting thing that's been going on lately here with this case. But it says the government has moved for an order asking that David Marcus comply with the rules. He wrote an op-ed and authored an opinion on the merits of the case. And they say, Marcus said, well, I'm not really a lawyer with the case. That was his defense. And they say, yeah, you are. You're plainly a lawyer associated with the case. Your formal representation involved matters handling at least one pretrial issue, including bail determination. So you don't get to use that defense like, well, I'm not her official lawyer, therefore I can write whatever I want. You can't do that. Also, it said that describes in different documents describe him as Maxwell's appellate counsel. And so the court is just going through here and saying, no, you are her lawyer. And so you can't make that argument. And he says, well, if I was her lawyer, I'm still not subject to the rule because I don't currently represent Maxwell. Judge says, no, not really. Nothing in the rule limits its application to lawyers who have formally entered a notice, and so it all applies to you. Such is the case with Ms. Marcus's role. He says Ms. Marcus attended a proceeding on her behalf, helped with the pretrial bail determinations, and so on. Therefore, he is ordered to comply with the rule. The government didn't ask for any discipline here. They just want him to not write more stuff, right? And the court says that this is done to make sure that the public dissemination of the information does not interfere with the trial. So we have a new order here from Judge Allison Nathan. Says, now, going forward, Mr. Marcus and all lawyers associated with the pending case are now clearly on notice that their conduct falls under the purview of 23.1. This goes for everybody, the judge says. You must take care to protect the right to a fair trial by an impartial jury. So you can't go out there and start saying things that might make the jury impartial. The court is cognizant that criminal matters heading toward trial are especially sensitive to extrajudicial statements. Do you remember all of that extra sensitivity back during the Derek Chauvin trial? I sure don't. Do you? Probably not. All those associated with this case must act to ensure the case is tried solely in court, or else they think that being deemed responsible is undermining the integrity. All right, so there we go. Any further failure to comply with this, if you're talking out of turn, you are going to be subject to attorney discipline. So no more talking now. In the Ghislaine Maxwell case, so not a huge update out of there, but we'll see what happens. This whole thing is just a ball of yarn. And we'll see if we get any answers on it. We want them, and we're going to continue to cover the case. So let's take a look at some questions, see if anybody's chiming in over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Here we have a couple. Let's see who this one is. I'm Not Gas says, Rob, I think you're being a little too optimistic with your hope in alternative systems. We've already seen these companies collude with everything possible to remove people's voices. They ban them off social media. Payment processors refuse to service alternative social media. Hell, Amazon will refuse to host their servers. Cloudflare will remove their DDoS protection. Even after all, the FBI can seize your crypto. Yeah, you're right about that, right? I am optimistic about it. I might be overly optimistic about it, but I think that it's a good hedge against collapse and failure in the older system, right? I'm not somebody who says abandon the old system, but I am certainly saying, well, look, if you're going to be investing your time, if you're going to be sort of trying to change something, maybe your ROI is better used in some of these alternative systems, right? And we'll see where it goes. You can see that I'm sort of doing that right now, right? I've got one foot in each bucket. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Rumble, we're on Locals. And we'll see. And, good things are happening, right? Rumble and Locals, by the way, they just announced a partnership. So all of the content is sort of going to be integrated together. So I got really lucky that I just happened upon those two and started making those my backups, and they were going to work together. And so we'll see. I think that there is going to be a lot of growth. I think that it is very evident that people are wanting alternative information. And I'm pretty optimistic that they're going to find it and that people are going to be willing to get out there and deliver it. It may take 10 years. It may take 20 years. I don't know, right? Amazon, Google, Facebook, these are 20-year-old companies. It might be a 20-year thing. We'll see. We have another one here that's not loading. All right, here we've got Sergeant Bob says, I've done a lot of reading about the royal families. There were many affairs and, quote, relationships. Bloodlines are not clear in many cases. Not that I condone Prince Andrew, but the teenager was 17, and whatever this is alleged to have occurred will involve whatever the, quote, age of consent was at that location. Yeah, it's a good point. And if that was in London, I don't know what the age of consent is there, right? Look, and I highly doubt that it was just, one 17-year-old, even if it was, right? Even if it was legal and it's the prince and he shouldn't be trafficking in paid sex with 17-year-olds, that's still a problem, even if it was maybe legal in the UK. I don't know, right? I don't practice law over there. But whatever was happening with Epstein was gross and horrendous regardless. We have TOS Forever says, isn't Prince Andrew guilty? Must prove his innocence. Unlike the US, innocent must prove guilty. Do you think the picture came from Hunter's laptop? It's a good question. Hunter's laptop apparently is in the hands of the Russians, so maybe they, hacked something with those images. I don't know. But in the, I don't know how the UK system works, right? I don't know what the process looks like over there. Candidly, I really don't know what it is. So I'm not sure what he's going to go through. Probably nothing, though, because he's royalty, and nobody touches royalty. Even in the United States, we have our own version of that. We have Thunder 7 says it's a civil case, not a criminal one, so the police can't march in and arrest him. It's up to Randy Andy to respond to the lawsuit. If he's smart, he'll just pay $2 million to Virginia to stop more smut coming out against him. Remember that Ghislain can make a plea deal, and she knows all his dirty secrets. Well, yeah, I mean, Ghislain, she should be on high alert right now because we certainly don't want her to kill herself, just like Jeffrey Epstein did. Jeremy Matrida is here, says, technically speaking, the statement that no one is above the law is false. The Queen is above the law. They have some interesting rules. Quote, though there's an extensive list of rules and regulations members of British monarchy are required to follow, the royals are also permitted to break a number of rules and laws that would land everyday citizens in the big house. Is that a thing? I really don't get the British monarchy. I really don't get it. I had somebody explained it on a podcast one time as, their version of the Kardashians or something like that. Well, you have the Kardashians and we have the royalty. And I thought, we're not proud of that. Are you proud of that? I'm not proud of that. Queen owns England. The prosecutor is called the Crown. The Queen doesn't need a passport. The prince is a royal. The Queen can pardon him. There you go. There you go. It's pretty simple. They're above us. They're above the rest of us. They get to do what they want. We don't. And it is everywhere. They just happen to have old world titles like queen and prince and all of that stuff. We just have, president, senator, congressman. Same system, different labels. Peely Wally says, nothing will happen to Prince Andrew. I don't think the British people care too much. America wasn't too good in recent years when Anne Sokalos hit and killed a 17-year-old motorcyclist since she was driving on the wrong side of the road and hit him head on, then fled the U.S. and claimed diplomatic immunity. America was no help in that case, so no way the prince should help the U.S. It'll be brushed under the royal rug for sure. Yeah, and that's a good back and forth, right? Yeah, I didn't know that. I never heard of that story. But yeah, if the U.S. is not cooperative to British interests, well, why would they be cooperative to ours? I've said that, I don't like when the U.S. goes around and wags their finger at other people, do our bidding, right? It's insulting to the other countries. When Kamala went down to Guatemala and did that, I'm thinking, what? Who the hell are you to go down there? If you were in my country, if I was a Guatemalan, I'd say, what? Get out of here, lady. You don't know what we're doing here. Get out of here. And so she did, and they continued to immigrate into the country because nobody listened to her. But the point here is the same, right? Countries should be protective of their own interest and their own people, their own population. So if the UK needed help from the US and the US said, sorry, well, goes both ways, doesn't it? Maybe they're not going to help us on this one. Wouldn't surprise me a bit. Ghislaine Maxwell's here, says, I am regretting not fleeing the US with millions of dollars in my crypto wallet to a country with no extradition treaty with the US. Now I'm getting beaten. I can't see my lawyer, and my boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein, got suicided. Hashtag Epstein did not kill himself. Even Maxwell knows that he didn't. We all know. Ghislaine also is here, says, I should have fled to a country with no extra. Oh, we already got that one. McAfee didn't kill himself either. So McAfee, same comment. John Sesko is here, says, Maxwell should get a pardon. I'd give her 10 minutes on the outside before justice is properly served. Yeah, John, and maybe if you gave her the pardon and you said, we'll give it to you, but you got to tell us everything. Everything. Names, locations, phone numbers, addresses, dates, everything. Give you a pardon, and then you're on your own. Good luck. Good luck out there. TOS Forever says, Prince Charles had been very active in 2 child protection projects, which is perfect. One for school dropouts and one for hospital care. Might they have pulled the pictures off the Hunter laptop? That was the only one they could show. Ugh. There are some really, really disturbing, troubling photos from Hunter Biden's laptop. That's all I can say. Screw SDNY says, other than the Constitution, isn't treaties the supreme law of the land via the Supremacy Clause? It's sort of the federal government is. Yeah, there's a hierarchy there. And yes, so if the U.S. government, the federal government, enters into a treaty, and that is part of something that might be in conflict then through the supremacy clause, yes, that will supersede any underlying state issues, right? The supremacy clause gives the federal government one mechanism to exercise supremacy over the states when there are conflicting issues. Also, SDNY trash trying to ensure a, quote, fair trial by suppressing lawyers' First Amendment rights, which is really only to cover up the corruption of the SDNY. Did you know SDNY tried to suppress the speech of Viva Frei and Robert Barnes when they were reporting on the case? No, I did not know that. But that is unacceptable. Those two gentlemen are stand-up gentlemen. Offensive. All right, next up we have No Doubt says, the big tech companies are fighting to own your identities, and every time you log in with your Facebook, Gaggle, Peer, Microsoft account, you help them take over. Take your identity back wherever you can, and don't use these master IDs that are connecting you everywhere you go, following you around the internet, everywhere. A couple more we have here from Wide Awake says, surf lives matter. That's right. Yeah, we do. Yeah, hey, us peasants, we're people too. Dang it, we want to be heard. We have Sergeant Bob says, and then Senator Ted Kennedy drove his Lincoln off a bridge and Mary Joanne Kopechny drowned. No real consequences. He was part of royalty. You're right. The Kennedys are royalty here, right? Just like the Clintons are, just like the Bushes are, just like the Trumps are, just like the Bidens are. They're all royalty. The rest of us are just the little peasants. We have Wolfgang, the super chat came in from Furby Slayer, says, force the Queen to give him sovereign immunity. If she does, it's basically an admission. So I say go through with the lawsuit. So I see. Yeah, so sort of just acknowledging, okay, you got him. You're immune. You don't have to comply with any of these things. You're free to go, right? You've already withdrawn from public life. We got, well, nothing else to do with you anymore, but you're not going to be charged with a crime, sovereign immunity. It's an admission without the penalty, but it's better than nothing. I understand your point there, Furby. It's a good point. We have Kenneth Fielders here, says the problem is grandfathered in practices, point the finger, push the blame, deflect the responsibility. Yeah, they do that in all parts of the world, right? All over the place. Everybody points their fingers all over the place. January 6th incident, right? DC Metro Police, it's the Capitol Police. It's the FBI. Oh, no, it's the DEA. Oh, no, it's the Sergeant at Arms of the Senate. No, in the House. Oh, no, wait. It's the other, it's nonstop. Finger pointing all over the place because they're all incompetent and they're just trying to defray and decentralize the full quantity of that incompetence so that it doesn't fall squarely on their shoulders. They want to carry the load. And fortunately, there are many, many, many government institutions that will allow that to happen. All right, my friends, those were all of the great questions that came in on the show today. I want to give a couple quick shout outs before we wrap it up. Over on watchingthewatchers.locals.com, we've got Jack Alaya, I'm Not Gas. We have, let's see here, NY Renal MD and others are chatting away over there. Let's see, we also got on YouTube, we have Stace on the Case. We have A Straight and Narrow. We have Zorro. We got Todd Hupp. We got Lady Zaga and others. Big shout outs to the super chats that came in today. Thank you so much for all of those. Very generous. Kenneth Fielder, thank you. We've got Red Devil subscribed. Furby, Wolfgang in the house. Brody Z, big shout out to Newbie. Eddie Oliver for a few of those today. Alex Bogey along with Dr. Sammy D. Thank you all so much for those super chats. And there were great questions that came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There's a lot of fun that's going on there in the chat, a lot of activity over there. And I want to welcome a new subscriber who just signed up and joined us on the community. Big, big welcomes to Daver SEC or Davers EC. I'm not sure what it is. Let me know if you want me to get clearer on that. But Daver Sec is here. And I want to welcome you along with Shifty Shift. We got 503 Unlimited. We got Mary B 585, The Real Patriot. We have Laura SB. Shout outs to D Rodriguez. We got Wendy Deer, Stoic RD, and Daver. Thank you so much for signing up for the year, by the way. Really do appreciate that. Shout outs to everybody else who signed up last week. If you want to join us, it's $5 a month or $50 annually. You get 2 months for free if you join up that way. And I want to invite you because in about 2 weeks, we've got our locals meetup coming up on Saturday, August 28th, 2021, 7 to 8 p.m. It is a lot of fun. We get to put names to faces, get to connect with anybody. What we're doing is building a community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we'd love it if you joined up over there and supported us and got to stick around and meet some people because that's what it's all about. It's about the connections. And we are grateful for you for helping us facilitate that. All right, my friends, and that is it for me for the day. I want to thank you once again for being a part of the show. We're going to be back here, same time, Same place tomorrow, 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and for that one Florida man. Everybody else, have a tremendous evening. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.